Chapter 413. Bah. The Oriental dancer was all wet with sweat. She raised her hand to wipe the sweat on her forehead with the shovel in one hand, and immediately a white and delicate skin appeared in the dust. Digging in a sandy environment, if she wasn't careful, she would be covered in dust and sand. Now, a beautiful woman had become like a beggar, spitting out a mouthful of sand. The structure of this underground ruin was not very good. If she dug a little bit, the quicksand would pour down. Just now she was almost buried. Ho ho ho. The Oriental dancer opened her mouth and gasped for breath. After turning around and glancing at Soren on the side, she couldn't help but complain, "Hey, haven't you rested well? How long will it take for me to finish digging?" At first, Soren threw a shovel to her. She thought it was two people digging up, but she didn't expect that she was the only one doing it. After a long time, she only dug a little bit. If this continued, she didn't know how long she would be trapped. As for Soren, he had been sitting there to rest for almost 5 or 6 hours now. Every time she was tired from digging or after being drenched by sand from head to toe, the Oriental dancer would look back at Soren. He was still sitting cross-legged there. Every time she looked at him, there would be more resentment in her eyes. "He's not a gentleman at all," the Oriental dancer muttered in a low voice. Then she raised her hand and moved her long hair. Her hair was full of dust, which was very uncomfortable for someone who loved cleanliness. After digging for a long time, she sweated a lot. The sweat mixed with dust stood on her body, making her feel as if she had been rolling in mud at the moment. But after complaining for a while, she finally dug hard because she could see that Soren was seriously injured at the moment. In fact, Soren was seriously injured now. Under the burning explosion of the baler, he was directly put into a state of near death. The reason why he could still move freely now was entirely because of his extraordinary constitution. At this moment, Soren seemed to be resting, but in fact he was rememorizing spells. The Oriental dancer didn't know that Soren was still a wizard. Naturally, she thought that Soren was resting and recovering. Moreover, other wizards needed to take out a spellbook to memorize spells. She had never seen a wizard like Soren who relied entirely on memories to memorize spells. Although he paid a lot of slaughter EXP, the spells that Soren currently mastered were all imprinted from memory. He didn't need a spellbook to memorize spells, and he basically didn't have a spellbook on him. Oh. Soren slowly opened his eyes. He glanced at the Oriental dancer who was working hard in front of him, and a playful smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Now, the Oriental dancer was no longer as charming as she was at the beginning. She was completely a country woman covered in mud. Her appearance was really pleasing to see. There were a lot of messages prompts in front of him. The top one was, "Attacked by balers, incineration explosion. Condition reflex passed. You successfully avoided the core area of the explosion. You received 52 points of explosion damage. You received 12 points of fire damage. Critical point triggered. Ability breakthrough. Your ability, minor fire resistance, has been upgraded to minor fire resistance. Critical point triggered. Ability breakthrough. Your ability, minor fire resistance, has been upgraded to medium fire resistance." The baler was a ball of fire. Soren was suffering from fire damage from the beginning to the end. If it weren't for the support of the power of icing death, which could extinguish the magic flames on his body, he wouldn't have been able to hold on for so long. So after the battle, the first thing that broke out was the fire resistance that Soren had originally trained. It actually increased from minor fire resistance to medium fire resistance in one breath. Medium fire resistance, personal ability. The power of divinity allows you to increase your resistance against fire damage. From now on, you are immune to any fire damage below 5 points. When attacked by spells or spell-like attacks, any damage with fire effects will be reduced by 10 points. With the strengthening of the power of divinity, the effect of your fire resistance ability will gradually increase. Eventually, you may be immune to fire damage. Resistance was a very useful ability. After upgrading to high resistance, it could greatly increase survivability. However, if you wanted to be immune to a certain type of attack, you may need a more powerful ability. This was the domain of the gods. Soren currently had 2 types of resistance, minor cold resistance and medium fire resistance. Below were some other data. You have killed the baler, extracting the target's soul energy. You have gained 165,100 slaughter EXP. The target has divine ability. Divine power activated. Absorbing the target's remaining divinity. Divine transformation. You have gained 5 divinity points. More than 160,000 slaughter EXP. Although it was not enough for Soren to advance into the legendary realm, it was not much less than that. He still needed to get another elemental stone on this trip. At that time, it should be enough for him to advance into the legendary realm. As for the 5 divinity points, this surprised Soren. He did not expect to get so many divinity points from killing a high-level demon. It was a pity that this kind of thing was difficult to encounter again. After all, the difficulty of challenging a high-level demon and a demigod was not much different. But it was not surprising. The demons of the abyss had always had a divine bloodline. Many powerful demons clearly did not have divinity and clergy, but they could still use part of the power of the gods. This was the divine bloodline that they had. The children of the abyss demons. This time he was lucky to kill the Baler. Soren knew very well that if the opponent was not sealed here, he would have almost no chance of winning in a head-on battle. If he wanted to deal with such an enemy in the future, he would have to wait for the arrival of the Avatar Crisis before entering the bottomless abyss. At that time, the Baler would be the backbone of the first batch of demons. When the Avatar Crisis began, the bloody war in the abyss came to an end temporarily. The demons and devils turned their attention to other planes. Patter. Soren stood up slowly. He took out a shovel and began to dig silently. The most important thing now was to leave this place. About 3 hours later, another message appeared in front of him. War of the Baler, Legendary Battle. In early April 1676 of the New Moon era, you encountered a sealed Baler in the ruins of the ancient Arcane Empire. After a tough battle, you finally defeated this powerful enemy. The fall of a high-level demon made your existence begin to be noticed by the abyss. The Baler you killed is a descendant of an ancient Baler. Your existence will be sensed by some powerful demons. Legend +2, it was a little strange. Soren only got 2 legend points. Logically speaking, the Baler should be the most powerful monster he had challenged so far. But the legend points it gave him were only 2. Moreover, this time the legend points appeared very quickly. It seemed that it did not take a long time to appear like in the past. This made Soren fall into deep thought. Why is it like this? Soren thought quickly in his mind and secretly said, this Baler is so powerful. Why is it only 2 legend points? Even in naval battles legend points are higher than it. Could it be that the legend points are not directly related to the enemy's strength? Or are there other conditions that determine how much legend points are? Soren frowned slightly because he seemed to have found something. The legend points were not necessarily the more powerful the enemy was. Of course, defeating a powerful enemy would naturally give more legend points than defeating a weak enemy. But there seemed to be a benchmark that determined the number of legend points. Audience. Many of the legend points that Soren got in the past were because of the wide range of spread. Many battles were not as dangerous as today, but the legend points obtained were very high because these things were spread far and wide. But today, Soren didn't seem to have an audience at all. He wouldn't go to the tavern to brag about how he killed the Baler. Among all the people, only the Oriental dancer vaguely guessed that Soren defeated the Baler. Maybe this was why the legend points were low. Chapter 4:14. Soren was trapped. In fact, he and the Oriental dancer were trapped in the underground ruins for a whole day and night. By the time they finally dug out a tunnel and returned to the surface, the two of them were already a little exhausted. It looked like they had crawled up from the ground after rolling in the ground. Soren's body was a little better. After all, he was wearing tights. He just shook off the sand and mud on his cloak. But the Oriental dancer was wearing a long dress. When she climbed out, her whole body was gray. Only when she occasionally wiped her sweat would she wipe off the dust, revealing a piece of white skin. Finally, I climbed out. When the Oriental dancer came to the ground, she threw away the shovel directly, then sat on the sand unladylike, and then jumped up as if she had been electrocuted. At this moment, although the sky was getting dark, the temperature in the desert area was still very high. There were no traces of laborers and other teammates nearby, but there was a lot of garbage not far away. The wind and sand during the day were very strong. They had probably taken away everything that could be taken away. Now there was only garbage left on the entire ruins. Soren reached out and pushed the sand away. He touched the burnt charcoal and said in a deep voice, "They left not long ago. They should have packed up and left in the morning." The Oriental dancer came over and nodded gently, "These guys." "Forget it." Soren shook his head indifferently. He had seen too many things worse than this when he was in the Underdark. At least this time the people he met did not stab him in the back. He looked up at the sky and said slowly, "Let's rest here for a night. We will leave tomorrow." "You have found what you want?" We will separate tomorrow. Since you plan to go back to the Eastern Kingdom, let's leave early. It won't be long before this place becomes a place of trouble. The Oriental dancer nodded gently, and her eyes fell on Soren. She looked at him quietly for a while, and then a faint smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. She said softly, "Thank you." Soren waved his hand and said nothing. He just said, "I'm going to find some water. There should be an oasis nearby." Water. Hearing Soren's words, the Oriental dancer suddenly felt very uncomfortable. She couldn't help but quickly follow up and whisper, "Is there an oasis nearby? I'll go with you." There should be an oasis nearby. Because an adventurers' gathering place had once been established here, it was very difficult to resupply in the desert. The area near the underground ruins had been explored before they found this oasis as a camp. Soren followed his memory and soon saw a patch of green in the distance. A very small oasis. It was probably only about 100 meters wide. There were all kinds of vegetation growing on all sides as well as some tall trees. In the middle was a deep pool. It was a miracle in the desert that an oasis could be preserved in such a place with such strong sandstorms. Great! The Oriental dancer couldn't help but speed up her pace. When she came to the pool, she leaned over and drank a few mouthfuls. Then she held the water and washed her face. As the dust on her face was washed away, a charming face was also revealed. It had obvious Oriental characteristics and looked full of exotic charm. After she washed her face, her expression suddenly became a little shy. There was a slight blush on her charming face. She turned to look at Soren next to her. It seemed that she wanted to say something but couldn't. Soren was also washing his face. The cold water made him breathe a sigh of relief. He simply wiped his body and then noticed the Oriental dancer's gaze. "What's wrong?" Soren frowned slightly. The Oriental dancer's expression was a little shy. She seemed a little embarrassed, but she still whispered, "I want to wash up. Can you wait for me outside first?" It turned out that she wanted to take a bath. Soren stood up helplessly. He glanced at the dusty and embarrassed appearance of the opposite side and said, "Okay. I'll wait for you outside." Soren turned and left. After the Oriental dancer confirmed that he had gone out, she carefully untied her belt, but she still quietly glanced back and whispered, "I don't know if he will peek. Such a powerful rogue, if he turns around and sneaks back, I guess I can't find him, right? I don't care so much. I'd better take a bath first." The long skirt on the Oriental dancer's body was taken off, revealing a pair of slender legs. She explored the water with her feet, and then slowly unbuttoned her blouse. Her full breasts were like white jade in the moonlight. The Oriental dancer slowly entered the water with her hands in front of her chest. The water was sparkling and her white legs and slender waist were faintly visible. She sighed contentedly and then began to wash the dust on her body. "He is a good man. It's a pity that the person I like is D. Otherwise he would be really good." The Oriental dancer's whole body was soaked in the water, and her wet long hair spread out like water plants. She gently wiped her face and some thoughts ran wild in her mind. Her face was slightly red and she said, "Is he peeping?" In fact, she really thought too much. Soren walked out from the beginning. He was not interested in peeping at others taking a bath. In terms of beauty, Gloria was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. It was estimated that only Vivian might surpass her when she grew up in the future. So with Gloria, Soren was not so thirsty that he would turn around and peep at others taking a bath. Faint moonlight. Soren stood on the edge of the oasis and waited quietly. But when he felt that it was almost time to go back, there was a slight noise in front of him. Someone was approaching. Soren's figure instantly disappeared into the darkness, and then quietly moved in stealth. A person. A woman. Before Soren got close to the target, he saw a tall figure with long black hair hanging down naturally. He could recognize that it was a woman at a glance. The other party was wearing tight clothes, revealing the exquisite curves of her body. Her facial features were oriental, but she was taller than the northern woman. But this was not the key point. The key point was that Soren did not see any weapons on her, only a pair of black gloves. "Who?" A cold voice sounded, and then the woman in front of Soren stopped. Her figure flew up in an instant and directly locked onto Soren's position. Then she turned into a shadow and approached Soren. Her leg was mixed with a whistling wind, and she kicked at Soren with an amazing momentum. There was no sign of it. Soren didn't even know how the enemy determined his position. He could only be sure that he was not directly exposed. The other party seemed to be able to find him because of some supernatural ability. Was I discovered? Soren's expression was a little surprised. The rolling sand exposed his position. Bang! In the face of the enemy's high-speed kick attack, Soren had no time to dodge or draw his sword. He could only block it with his hands in front of his chest. Accompanied by the dull sound of flesh colliding, Soren took a little half-step back. The vigorous figure quickly retreated after colliding with Soren. She floated in the air like a goose feather and landed on the ground. Her eyes instantly became fierce and she said, "Rogue?" Clap. The woman in front of him clapped her hands together. As her palms clapped together, a faint magic aura immediately appeared on the gloves, followed by a jumping arc between her palms. This strange arc kept jumping in her palms, but it was not her own ability. It should be the power of the pair of gloves. This was a very special rare weapon. Lunge sideways raised her hand. The familiar posture made Soren's expression dignified for a moment. He slowly pulled out his curved sword icing death and said in a deep voice, "Pugilist." Pugilist. This was the first time Soren saw a woman advance into a pugilist. As an advanced extension of the monk profession, although there was no mandatory advancement requirement for a pugilist, it was extremely rare for a woman to advance into a pugilist as a profession. Soren had seen a female priest advance into a pugilist's modified version of Divine Fist in the past, but he had never encountered a female profession that accepted the orthodox pugilist's cultivation. Moreover, the opponent's strength seemed to be not below his. Chapter 4:15. Landslide. The tall figure came like a storm. As an advanced profession that leaned towards the monk class, the strength of a pugilist was basically above the advanced level. The woman in front of him kicked more than 10 meters away. Her figure flew through the air, and her slender and strong thighs rolled up the wind and sand, directly whipping towards Soren's abdomen. Clang. The curved sword icing death was instantly unsheathed, and Soren swung it horizontally. In the face of Soren's attack, the tall woman did not panic at all. Her slender and strong legs pulled back, and she actually rose directly from the ground. She continued to soar in the air without any relay point. Chi? Soren's pupils shrank in an instant, and he suddenly bent his body and stabbed his curved sword towards the opponent's lower body. Cloud ladder. Ethereal form. In the face of Soren's attack from below, the tall woman slightly frowned her beautiful willow-like eyebrows. She only saw her palms together and crackling lightning jumped in her palms. She swooped down towards Soren, and while her figure fell at a high speed, she strangely moved half a meter away. When she passed by Soren to avoid the attack, her palms turned into a gust of wind and hit Soren's vital parts. Gale attack. Arcs of lightning jumped in the air. Soren was shocked in an instant. He quickly protected his chest and blocked the enemy's attack. The opponent did not need a relay point at all. In the case of no foothold in the air, she could still launch continuous attacks. The enemy's fist hit Soren's body, but when she retracted her fist, Soren felt a shock in his chest. The force seemed to have passed through his arms and hit his internal organs directly. The subtle electric current jumped on Soren's body. Even with his strong physique, he felt numb all over. If it were anyone else now, they would have been paralyzed by the electric current. 1-inch punch? Soren's figure fell from the air, and his chest rose and fell violently. Suddenly, his throat moved and a trace of blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. 1-inch punch. Or it could be said that it was internal force as well as hitting a cow through a mountain. It was a battle technique that could ignore the opponent's defense. Soren's defensive equipment was basically useless against such an attack, and the enemy's attack directly penetrated his internal organs. This was an ability that could turn a fully armored heavy soldier into an idiot. Under such a special combat technique, any physical defense would basically be rendered useless. Evade sight. Soren's figure disappeared as soon as he landed on the ground. The tall woman also landed on the ground. She furrowed her beautiful eyebrows and looked around. It was quiet all around. It was as if Soren had evaporated into thin air. There was no trace of him at all. Shadow leap. Soren's figure suddenly appeared from behind the enemy's shadow. His scimitar flashed with a cold light as it pierced towards the enemy's heart. However, the moment he launched his attack, the tall slender woman clearly didn't notice his existence, but her body suddenly trembled, and she quickly turned around to avoid the cold light behind her. Evade instinct. Super sixth sense. When Soren realized that the enemy had actually dodged his attack, he immediately knew that things weren't going well. He immediately swung his scimitar horizontally. Clang. However, what happened next was a little different from his previous combat experience. The tall woman in front of him suddenly closed her palms and caught Soren's scimitar. Catching a blade with bare hands, crackling electricity appeared, and the electricity flowed along the weapon to Soren's arm. The tall woman in front of him sneered, and then suddenly twisted her waist. A pair of strong legs instantly clamped onto Soren's neck. Her legs locked onto Soren's neck, and then she suddenly used all her strength to flip him over onto the sand. Legendary. This woman was definitely a legendary pugilist. With such a reaction speed, such a predictive ability, Soren even suspected that she had mastered the terrifying ability, Sixth Sense. The tall woman stuck close to Soren. She was less than 5 centimeters away from Soren. At such a close distance, Soren could even feel her long black hair fluttering in the wind. Just as Soren was about to raise his scimitar, the woman's elbow hit his abdomen, and then her fist landed on his shoulder joint. In an instant, Soren's entire arm was completely numb, and he almost couldn't hold his scimitar. Elbow, knee, 1-inch punch. A series of continuous attacks landed on Soren like a storm, and he didn't even have the chance to fight back. Every attack Soren made would be detected by the enemy in advance, and she would instantly hit his weak points, making it impossible for Soren to fight back. Especially the pair of gloves that kept jumping with electricity. Although they couldn't do much damage to Soren, the electric arcs were a nightmare to Soren. Every time Soren was hit by the gloves, he felt like he was touching a high-voltage electric current. In this case, he might not even be able to use 30% of his usual combat ability. The close combat ability of a pugilist. Being stuck by the tall woman in front of him, Soren took more than 10 punches in just 1 or 2 seconds. He was like a human sandbag being hit by the opponent. If it weren't for his amazing physique and strong vitality, he would have been finished off by the opponent. Clang. In the face of the enemy's storm-like attacks, Soren finally made a decision. He directly let go of the scimitar in his hand, and instantly turned around and slammed into the opponent's body with his shoulder. Mountain lean. With the dull sound of flesh hitting flesh, the ferocious tall woman was finally knocked back a few steps by Soren. The distance between them was instantly pulled apart. Soren quickly reached for the scimitar on the ground, and the tall woman rushed forward and slapped him in the chest. Crackling electricity leaped about. A sneer appeared at the corner of Soren's mouth. He suddenly withdrew his hand that was grabbing curved sword icing death. The next moment, a pale golden cold light appeared in his palm. At the moment when the tall woman in front of him rushed over, he waved the fine gold dagger and stabbed the other party's chest. It was a trap. The tall woman's expression was stern. When the forward momentum disappeared, she instantly twisted her body and dodged. At the same time, her slender and strong thighs whipped Soren's chest. Bang! Both of them were sent flying. Soren pressed his hand on his chest and coughed slightly, while the tall woman pressed her hand on her elbow, where there was a slight bloodstain. If it weren't for her strong dodging ability, she would have lost half of her life. After all, a pugilist would not use other weapons except for boxing gloves, and would hardly wear any armor. Note: armor type is definitely the Sixth Sense. Soren gently moved his feet and placed the fine gold dagger in front of his chest. The pugilist's ability to rush forward was too strong. Once the distance was too close, the scimitar would become restrained. It was not as good as the small fine gold dagger. The woman in front of him should have mastered a supernatural ability like this Sixth Sense. Otherwise, it would be impossible for her to continuously dodge Soren's attacks, and even predict the position of his attack. Soren also had the ability, Danger Sense, but when fighting with the tall woman in front of him, it was as if it didn't exist at all. The only explanation was that she had a more powerful supernatural ability that completely suppressed Soren's danger sense. Expeditious steps. The woman in front of him looked at Soren coldly. She took a hairband from her left arm and did not look at the bloodstain on her arm. She just gently tied up her long black hair. It was not until now that Soren noticed that there was still a hairband tied around her arm. After tying her hair into a neat ponytail, the tall woman's momentum suddenly became more aggressive. Seismic strike. 1-inch punch, landslide. The tall woman suddenly jumped up and swept through the air like a wild goose. Her long hair was tied into a single ponytail flying in the air, and she rushed toward Soren with a fierce blow. Stop. But just when Soren was about to face her with the fine gold dagger, the figure of the Oriental dancer suddenly appeared and shouted at the tall woman in the air, Stop fighting. He's not an enemy. Chapter 4:16. The tall woman's figure landed. However, she still moved her right leg forward and put on a half-bow posture, ready to attack again at any time. Soren also squatted slightly, holding the fine gold dagger in his hand, ready to fight at any time. The loss just now made him feel a little aggrieved. Even if it was a legendary fist master, he should not have been so helpless. What made him most afraid was not the opponent's fighting ability, but the damn gloves. The electric current was too disgusting for a rogue like him. There were all kinds of elemental attacks. Electric damage was the most likely to trigger negative statuses, which people who had accidentally touched household circuits knew. This pair of gloves might not be legendary equipment, but it was not far from it. The Oriental dancer quickly came to the tall woman's side, almost threw herself into her arms, then hugged her slender waist and said in a happy voice, "Dee, why are you here?" The tall woman's attention was still on Soren and she whispered, "I heard that the princess assigned you a task. I was a little worried about the difficulty of the task. I was afraid that you would be in danger, so I came here. Be careful of this man. He's very dangerous and seems very evil." The other party seemed to have seen the aura on Soren's body through some means. As the pirate king who ruled the three seas, if Soren used a detection spell on him, it would definitely be a very evil magic aura. There were many mysterious means in the East, but it was not a paradise for wizards. Professionals from the East seemed to be able to master some special abilities in their cultivation. Sixth sense. One of the most powerful supernatural abilities. The ability that Soren longed for but could not get. In fact, he had spent a lot of effort to get a weakened version of danger sense. If he wanted to get a more powerful, sixth sense ability, he could only rely on some kind of adventure or enter the realm of the gods himself. As for the more advanced, super sixth sense, it was a legendary ability. The number of people in the world who had mastered this ability was less than 2 digits. Note, the sixth sense is equivalent to a natural superpower. It is basically impossible to train it. You can only master danger sense through training. When a legendary monk reaches a certain level, his perception may be further strengthened to the sixth sense ability as a natural-born supernatural ability. He's fine. The Oriental dancer raised her head and looked at Soren. The expression on her face was a little complicated. She said softly, "I'll tell you this later. Can you stop now? He saved me once. They're not enemies. Why don't we sit down first?" Hearing the words of the Oriental dancer, the tall woman raised her beautiful eyebrows slightly, then glanced at Soren and slowly withdrew her stance. Soren frowned slightly and looked at the Oriental dancer and her. Then he put away the fine gold dagger. He pulled out the curved sword icing death from the ground, and his eyes fell on the tall woman. Fist Master D. She was a very strong woman. However, Soren wasn't afraid of her if she used all her trump cards. Fist Master and Sword Saint had the same fighting style. They both pursued the extreme path. This kind of fighting technique might be very powerful, but it also had an obvious weakness. They could be killed in an instant if they seized the opportunity. This kind of advanced profession might be very powerful in a one-on-one fight, but if there were too many enemies, the situation would be very dangerous. In short, Soren had been punched by her more than 10 times, and now he was only a little injured. However, if she was hit by Soren once, then the injury would be very serious. Because Fist Master only wore gloves to fight, and there was basically no armor on his body. Note, Fist Master can't even wear leather armor. At most he can only wear arm guards. The woman in front of him did not wear arm guards. The group approached the oasis. The Oriental dancer whispered to her. It seemed that she was talking about what happened before. From time to time, the tall D would look back at Soren with a slightly surprised expression. Soren sat by the campfire and quietly wiped his curved sword. He seemed to be uninterested in their conversation. Wait a minute. D looked at Soren again and whispered, "You mean he may have killed the Baler below? How is this possible? Even I am no match for the Baler. With this man's strength, I'm afraid it's difficult to get close to it." The Oriental dancer glanced at Soren quietly and whispered, "It's probably true. It's all collapsed down there. But I didn't see it either. Maybe he didn't show his real strength just now, or it's because he's still injured." Dee shook her head gently as if she still didn't believe it. After a while, she slowly came to Soren and whispered, "Thank you. If it weren't for you, Yukari would be in danger today." Yukari? Was that the name of the Oriental dancer? Their names were really strange. They were all monosyllabic, and it seemed that they didn't even mention their surnames. Soren looked up at her. At this time he saw the real appearance of the woman in front of him. Willow leaf eyebrows, almond-shaped eyes, an oval face, a small cherry mouth, a high nose and long black hair. It seemed that from any angle, she had all the beautiful characteristics of an Oriental woman. Obviously, she had the kind of weak beauty with the aura of the East, but he didn't expect her to be so fierce and vigorous in battle. Full breast, slender waist, slender and strong thighs. Soren's eyes stopped on the white and slender thighs of the other party. It was not that he hadn't seen a pugilist before, but it was the first time he met a pugilist who could practice hidden power on the legs. Chi. Soren wasn't sure if it was the power of Chi, or the other party's talent was really amazing. However, the woman in front of him had undoubtedly left a deep impression on him. She had even mended some of the loopholes in his fighting style. Her kick, which seemed to be incomparably ferocious, was actually mixed with hidden force. In the future, it would be best to be more careful when encountering professionals from the East. He had traveled in the Eastern Kingdom in the past, but he hadn't received the training of the Eastern Kingdom. Maybe he could try it in the future. Even Droll and Rangers could learn from the professionals of the Eastern Kingdom. As a rogue, he should also have the opportunity to learn from them. Let's take a break. Soren stirred the bonfire, looked up at the dim starry sky and said slowly, I'll keep watch. I'll leave tomorrow. Since you've got what you need, you should leave here early. As soon as he finished speaking, the Oriental dancer who came over could not help but tremble, but not because of Soren's words. She raised her hand and pointed to the sky in surprise. Her expression seemed a little horrified and she said incoherently, Look. Look over there. Stars. No. It's the stars. It's falling. Soren immediately turned and looked in the direction pointed by the Oriental dancer. Dee also quickly looked up at the sky, only to see a star in the distance that suddenly became very dim, like a light bulb that was about to go out. Then it suddenly disappeared without a trace. But this was just the beginning. Just after its light completely disappeared, suddenly a very dazzling brilliance appeared in its original position. This was completely different from the light at the beginning. In the past, its light was like a star. Although it could be seen clearly, it was far away just like the earth in the starry sky. But now its light felt so close. It was as if it had been in two different latitudes before, but now it was in the same plane. The dazzling star crossed the sky, falling like a meteor. Although it only flashed for a moment, it still made people feel a strong shock. The kind of shock that could not be described in words. Soren stood up. He had been looking at the direction where the star fell, and his expression was unprecedentedly dignified. Because a god had fallen. He didn't know which god had fallen, but he knew that if such a vision appeared in the sky, then a true god must have fallen. He was dead. Even the high and mighty gods would die one day. Chapter 417. Soren was not on the south coast. No one knew when it started, but the news was spread out by others. The legendary pirate king was not on the south coast, and naturally, it inevitably caused others to be restless. There was no doubt about Soren's deterrence. His existence was a legend on the south coast. As long as he was in the south coast, no one dared to make any moves. But now there was news that he was no longer on the south coast. It was very likely that he was in the Frost Kingdom on the other side of the continent. This made many people who secretly spied on them to take action. The Pirate King of the Amazon. The Pirate King active in the Amazon Islands seemed to feel threatened by Soren's strength, but she did not launch an attack. Instead, she expanded the scope of her activities a little more than before. It was obvious. The territory under her control was about to connect to Soren's overseas route. But this was not the biggest threat on the south coast because the Pirate King of the Amazon had always been very cautious. She should not have any intention of going to war with Soren at the moment. Therefore their actions were only a test, a hidden provocation. The real threat was the Principality of Rossard. In the battle to defeat the Pirate King Ashrod, Soren also severely damaged the navy of the Principality of Rossard. He even killed the Duke of Red Dragon's wife once, forcing her to use life hiding to resurrect. This kind of hatred was very strong. To some extent, it was almost impossible to resolve. So after getting the news that Soren was not on the south coast, the navy of the Principality of Rossard immediately took action. This action alarmed the half-elf first mate who was guarding the eastern route. He could deal with the pirates in the east, but he could not deal with the Duke of Red Dragon's wife. Without any way to contact Soren, the only thing he could do was to ask for help from Mordor. Raging Sand Island. This used to be the base of the Pirate King Ashrod. Now it was the transit station of the eastern route that the half-elf first mate was in charge of. At this moment, the port was solemn as if a storm was coming. The Principality of Rossard's navy was moving abnormally. Through some unknown means they had secretly equipped more warships. There was news that the Amazon pirates were secretly supporting them, but there were no more specific sources of information. The only thing that was certain was that the navy of the Principality of Rossard had been replenished with a large number of warships and had rebuilt a powerful navy. In the entire south coast area, the only ones who could support them with so many things, other than the few nearby kingdoms, were the Amazonian women. It was impossible for the kingdom to send its own warships to support the navies of other countries, so the possibility of it being an Amazon woman was the highest. The Amazon islands were originally overseas. The warships were their standing force, and it was not difficult for them to support the Principality of Rossard. A warship gradually approached Raging Sand Island. At this moment, many people had gathered at the port, including the half-elf first mate and other pirate leaders. They were all waiting at the port. The entire south coast. Other than Soren, there was only one other person who could make them wait so respectfully. Gloria's figure appeared on the deck. She was wearing a black wizard robe, and her face was covered with a veil. Even so, at this moment she still looked so beautiful, as if with a mysterious color. Next to her was little Vivian. Today Vivian was wearing a pure white princess dress, and behind her was Lulu, who looked a little confused. Finally, in the dark corner of the cabin, there seemed to be another figure wearing a wizard robe. She did not directly show up but stood quietly behind. "Your Excellency." The half-elf first mate knelt on one knee, and the pirate leaders behind him all knelt on one knee and said, "Your Excellency." Miss Soren's intentions were becoming more and more obvious. His ambition made the enemy feel uneasy. Not only did his men understand something, but his enemies were also aware of something. Especially after taking over the west coast and the north coast, Soren's former enemies were obviously more and more uneasy. At the same time, some rules were quietly changing. The pirate leaders who used to be lawless, now began to learn the law and rules. They needed to learn how to become managers, because they were no longer pirates who ran away after robbing, but a ruling class that each had a territory to manage and build. "Get up." Gloria walked gently like a noble princess. She reached out and took little Vivian, glanced at the other pirate leaders and slowly said, "Let the others gather in the council hall." "Yes." The half-elf first mate said respectfully. It could be said that in the whole south coast, besides Soren, only Gloria could control these unruly pirate leaders. Not only because of her identity in the Northern Witch Council, but also because of her strength. It could be said that since she followed Soren to the outer islands, Gloria's identity and status were destined to be extraordinary. In the absence of Soren, although she rarely intervened in the affairs of the outer islands, there was no doubt that she had the right to speak. Night fell. Gloria rubbed her forehead tiredly and then put down the file in her hand. The situation in the Eastern Sea route was not very good. The Principality of Rossard's navy was growing stronger, and the possibility of a war with them was too high. New hatred and old hatred. Gloria was also a powerful spellcaster. She knew how much the Duke of Red Dragon's wife hated Soren. Today they discussed in the council hall for the whole afternoon. All the intelligence showed that the Principality of Rossard may threaten the Eastern Sea route, and the female pirates of the Amazon seemed to be ready to make a move. These Amazonian women were not simple. They were not simple pirates. Behind them stood the Amazons and the Church of God that believed in the Storm Lord. Soren's expansion was too fast. Everyone in the vicinity felt threatened, and the number of enemies increased. "Sister Gloria?" Vivian's clear voice sounded. The little girl walked up with a plate of snacks and said very cleverly, "Look, I brought you some delicious food." Lulu followed behind like a little tail, looking at the exquisite snacks with a face full of desire. Just one look and one could tell that it was delicious. Meow. Gloria's beautiful face could not help but show a smile. She just opened her mouth and was about to say something. Suddenly, her face changed slightly and she disappeared, leaving only a shadow. "Vivian, you stay here." Short distance teleportation. Gloria's figure appeared on the roof in an instant, and there was another figure that appeared with her. "Mother." She looked at the empty sky and said with a dignified face, "Let's force her out." A ray of magical light appeared. Gloria's figure rose into the air, and Fallen Witch, who was covered in a black robe, also flew up. In front of them. There was a strange chuckle, and then under the magic light, a figure wearing a fiery red dress with a pair of huge red dragon wings behind her appeared. "You are Gloria?" The figure was very hazy under the moonlight, but it was not difficult to identify her. Gloria's expression was very indifferent. She turned around and looked at Fallen Witch behind her and said slowly, "Mother. Let me meet her. I just recently finished a little thing." Snap. Gloria raised her hand and snapped her fingers. This action seemed to be learned from Soren. A pale golden light appeared. A deck of tarot cards appeared in Gloria's palm. With a gentle wave of her white fingers, the tarot cards in her palm all fluttered in the air. 56 cards revolved around her body, shining with a strange arcane brilliance. These tarot cards were like mysterious runes that revolved around her body. Although only 56 cards have been completed, it should be enough to deal with you. With a smile on her face, Gloria gently flicked her finger on a tarot card. The next moment, a shocking bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, and the surging electric light directly struck the enemy in front of her. Lightning. A dark golden card emerged. This was a card that Soren had seen before. At this moment, it was held between Gloria's fingertips, but she didn't seem to want to use it. Tarot cards. There were a total of 78 cards, 22 main cards and 56 secondary cards. The dark golden card between Gloria's fingertips at the moment was the Queen of the 22 main cards. This dark golden card seemed to have a powerful magic that was completely different from the other 56 secondary cards. Chapter 4:18. Under the night sky it was quiet. Soren sat cross-legged by the campfire, holding the curved sword Icing Death with both hands on his knees. This was the cultivation method of the Sword Saint, a mysterious realm similar to meditation. At the moment when the mind was calm to the extreme, the sensory world would capture the tremor in an instant, so the Sword Saint's moves were always so accurate and fatal. This was also the basic cultivation to master the legendary ability, Insight into Weakness. For a rogue like Soren, it would take a lot of effort to master it in the future. Dee was also sitting cross-legged. However, she was not meditating, just sitting in a very ordinary meditation. Her whole person seemed very relaxed. She was vaguely similar to the boxing master Soren had seen before. The Oriental dancer rested her head on her slender and strong thighs. The relationship between the two women made Soren feel a little strange. He didn't know if they really just had a good relationship or there was some other special relationship. Dee in front of him looked like a gentle big sister at the moment, occasionally reaching out and stroking the long hair of the Oriental dancer. Her eyes were clear. Soren had never seen such clear eyes. It was a pure heart and a pure power. Body, spirit, soul. The cultivation of a boxing master was very similar to that of a monk. They could get a pure body through exercise and be completely immune to any disease effect. With further exercise, the physical body of a boxing master would gradually approach perfection, and they would be immune to any poison effect. When the cultivation reached a certain level, the spirit of a boxing master would become very pure, and their body and spirit would enter a mysterious state of emptiness. In the end, a boxing master would also cultivate to the realm of transcendence, like a monk. In simple words, the woman in front of him had cultivated to the point where spirit, chi, and spirit were integrated. Her clear eyes represented a real power. Your mind is not calm. Dee looked at Soren for a long time and suddenly said slowly, although you have extraordinary concentration, as long as your mind is not really calm, you will never feel the real way of cultivation. Soren slowly raised his head and said in a deep voice, what should I do? I can't teach you. Dee shook her head gently, took off the hairband behind her, and let her long black hair fall. She raised her hand and stroked the side of the Oriental dancer's face, whispering, in the Eastern Kingdom, everyone's way of cultivation is different. Even monasteries of the same school have different ways of cultivation. You have a very strong conviction. I can feel it. This is a very good thing. When you find the path of cultivation, this belief will become your greatest motivation. Dee paused for a moment before continuing, when I left my hometown I met a droll. Like you, he comes from the other side of the continent. Although he has some mysterious magic that allows him to reach the Eastern Kingdom very quickly, he is still a magician. But in the end he still chose to travel on foot. He spent more than a year walking tens of thousands of miles, passing through forests, grasslands, deserts, and finally arrived at the Green Dragon Lake in the Eastern Kingdom. Before I left he had already stayed there for 3 years. Every day he would plant trees, flowers, and grass, and then meditate there to cultivate. He said that he was comprehending the way of nature. Drill's way of nature is different from our path of cultivation. The power you use is not the same as ours. So if you plan to cultivate, you should find the answer from the source of your own power. At this point, Dee stopped. She slowly closed her eyes as if she was not interested in saying anything more. Soren was lost in thought. If the source of Drill's power was the way of nature, then where was the source of the power of rogues? Combat skills? No. In terms of combat skills, rogues were above many professions because they were the most proficient group of people. Soren looked at the bonfire and noticed the shadow under the fire. Shadow. He gently spread out his palm, his expression a little thoughtful. The source of the power of rogues should be the shadow. This was the only supernatural power they could use, and it was also the support of most supernatural abilities. But for this ability, Soren was not so familiar with it, nor did he have many clues to improve it. More often than not, it was more like a bloodline ability that penetrated into the body little by little with the improvement of profession level and strength. From the moment they advanced into rogues, their bodies began to adapt to the power of the shadow. The mysterious Eastern Kingdom. They seemed to have a completely different path. No wonder more and more professions went to the Eastern world in the past hundreds of years. Soren did not have many clues. After all, he did not know much about the cultivation of the Eastern Kingdom, but he was more familiar with something. That was the Sword Saint. The existence of the Sword Saint was the perfect combination of different profession systems on both sides of the mainland. They inherited the explosive power of the warriors on the mainland and also mastered the most mysterious Qi in the Eastern Kingdom. Qi/. This was the most iconic ability of the Sword Saint. It burst out one's combat power at the peak in an instant. Now all the sword moves that Soren had mastered were basically extended from the explosive skill of Qi/. Soren felt that there was a fog in front of him. He seemed to see something, but it seemed that he did not see anything. He thought of the storm Ronin he first encountered. Although it was an advanced profession of the ranger warrior, its combat skills obviously had traces of storm attack. Maybe I should go to the Eastern Kingdom again when I have the chance. Soren stood up slowly. He turned his head and glanced at Dee behind him. He whispered, "It's almost dawn. Let's part here. Take care of yourselves. I hope we can meet again when we have the chance." A glimmer of light gradually appeared on the horizon. Soren turned and walked away without saying much. The Oriental dancer also slowly opened her eyes. She watched Soren's back as he left. Her expression was a little complicated, a little reluctant, but in the end, it turned into calmness. "Let's go too." Dee slowly stood up and gently stamped her feet. The sand in front of her collapsed and buried the bonfire. She turned and stroked the side of the Oriental dancer's face. She slowly said, "The princess is still waiting for us to go back. Recently, the monasteries all over the country seem to have taken action. I'm worried that the evil things underground will run out again." Guarding the evil things. From the fall of the Arcane Empire to the present, the ancient evil things sealed underground had always been the great enemy of the entire Eastern Kingdom. The two tall figures gradually went away. Before leaving, the Oriental dancer looked behind her again. Soren's figure had gone far away. She could only vaguely see a small black dot. The wind and sand gradually spread. This desert was the border between the two countries, and it was also the place where the Arcane Empire was really destroyed. In this desert, there used to be the most brilliant arcane civilization that radiated throughout the multiverse, but now it had become the most barren and dangerous desert of death. Energy radiation destroyed everything. This desert covered more than a quarter of the land of the entire continent and also isolated the two countries for thousands of years. It was not until the ascetics from the east appeared and the south coast opened the eastern route that the connection between them began to gradually increase. However, for ordinary people, the Eastern Kingdom was still an unreachable, unknown place. The Frost Kingdom, Arendelle. Recently there was one more famous person in Arendelle. That was the descendant of Queen Isabella, Lady Adele Isabella. In other parts of the continent, it was not so easy for a woman to get a title, but in Arendelle there was no such concern. This Adele Isabella was the new favorite of Arendelle. She not only had a noble bloodline, a beautiful face and amazing wealth, but also had a close relationship with Princess Anna of Arendelle. She would be invited to almost every palace banquet and always sat beside Princess Anna. She was like Princess Anna's closest friend. Her existence was even heard of by other kingdoms in the south. After all, the bloodline of Queen Isabella had different meanings. It was also on this day. The new famous person in Arendelle, Lady Adele Isabella, left here. She was going to take a merchant ship to the south coast because she still had her own business in Shipwreck Bay. The news had spread to the kingdoms on the south coast. Many of the nobles in the south began to arrange for people to meet this woman with a noble bloodline. Her beauty, her wealth, her status, all of them made the nobles in the south restless. A woman with a noble background could not only increase the value of the family, but also share a huge wealth through her. They could also build a relationship with the rich Arundel. Both the woman and the wealth. Many nobles in the south were planning their own wishful thinking. Soren's plan had begun to brew. Chapter 419. About 300 kilometers south along the desert, there was a special place where there was a volcano, but it had not erupted for hundreds of years. This volcano was Soren's destination, and the third elemental stone was on the altar near the volcano. Fire elementals were the most difficult to deal with among the four major elements, but for Soren he had just killed a Baler, so dealing with some fire elementals was as easy as child's play. With his current fire resistance and the power of the curved sword icing death, he was basically not afraid of the fire on their bodies. But there was also something here that he was more afraid of. A dragon. Dragons had always lived all over the world, but most of them did not like places with human activities, so many dragons built their lairs in deserted areas. And Soren's current location naturally met all the conditions of a dragon, so his destination was actually the territory of an adult dragon. Although it was not the first time Soren fought against a dragon, he was not naive enough to think that he could easily fight a dragon alone. Especially the dragon entrenched here, it was not so easy to deal with. It was a brass dragon. The brass dragon was a dragon of the chaotic good alignment. It was different from the pure-blooded dragon Soren had encountered in the past. The brass dragon belonged to the metal dragon, while the red dragon and the white dragon belonged to the pentashade dragon. Most of the metal dragons were dragons of the good alignment, so they were not very aggressive. Unfortunately, as an evil alignment, the danger of the metal dragon was not much different from the pentashade dragon to Soren. This was the disadvantage of the evil alignment. It was easy to fight with the good alignment, but it was also easy to fight with the evil alignment. The one entrenched here was an adult brass dragon. Its existence had long been known by others, and even a desert caravan had encountered it and called it Desert Wind. The brass dragon was a very special kind of dragon. The reason why they were special was because they had a special characteristic, and that was that they liked to talk nonsense with others. There was a passage that recorded them like this. Brass dragons are extremely talkative and can speak well. Sometimes they can provide some useful information for adventurers, but it usually takes a long time of chatting and hinting that they want to give it a gift before the brass dragon will tell the news. The pupils of a brass dragon will gradually darken with age, until they look like molten metal balls. Brass dragons like dry, high temperatures. They spend most of their time bathing in the scorching sun of the desert. They give off a strong smell of metal or sand. They like to build their nests in high caves. Brass dragons can eat almost anything, but they usually eat very little. They can get nutrients from the morning dew. Since the habitat of brass dragons and blue dragons was the same, blue dragons were the most dangerous enemies for brass dragons. If it's a one-on-one battle, the bigger blue dragon will have the upper hand. For brass dragons, talking to adventurers is more attractive than fighting. That was right. You didn't read it wrong. Brass dragons were labeled as extremely talkative, good at speaking, likes to chat, and so on. In the simplest and most straightforward words, brass dragons were the talkative kind among the pure-blooded dragons, and they were born to be talkative. There was such a saying back then. What's the easiest thing to produce in the chaotic camp? Without a doubt, it's a joker. Note, since ancient times, chaos has produced jokers. Brass dragons. They were the jokers among the dragons. They were born chaotic, kind, and talkative. Not only were they jokers, but they were also the battle bee of jokers. The place where Soren was now. It was the territory of the brass dragon called the Desert Wind. It once did a very funny thing. It kidnapped a team of adventurers. Then it forced them to chat with it for 3 days and 3 nights. After satisfying its desire to be a chatterbox, it released the adventurers who were about to be played to the point of breaking down. Because it didn't do anything bad, and its strength was quite strong, no one came to crusade against this brass dragon. Basically, this desert area was its independent kingdom, and it lived here well until the end of the Avatar crisis. Maybe most of the guys who were born to be funny were lucky. Anyway, Soren didn't hear of anyone who killed it. Note 1. There are not many brass dragons and most of them live in the deserted desert. Note 2. Because of living in the deserted desert, the brass dragon's desire as a chatterbox often cannot be satisfied. A volcano appeared in front of Soren's eyes. Fortunately, the figure of the brass dragon did not appear. The dragon slept for a long time in its life. It was not difficult to find the elemental altar. Because all the elemental altars had a symbolic feature, there was an elemental nearby. So if you found the fire elemental, you could find the location of the elemental altar. Fly. Soren carefully looked around the volcano, and soon he found traces of the fire elemental. It was not difficult to deal with these fire elemental. Soren's fire resistance was enough to ignore the fire on their bodies, so it was easy to kill a large number of them. Slaughter EXP was constantly accumulating. When Soren cleaned up a lot of the fire elemental near the elemental altar, he gradually approached the center of the altar. Then he began to look carefully. Time went by little by little. Soren's expression became more and more puzzled. At last, he frowned and stood in place, seeming to be lost in thought. The fire elemental stone was not here. This was a very strange thing because according to the information in his memory, the location of the 4 elemental stones should not be wrong. Although the specific details were not announced at that time, the general location would not lie. The fire elemental stone should be here. Soren's previous 2 elemental stones were obtained from the altar. Why couldn't he find the fire elemental stone here? He did not give up and looked again. Unfortunately, he still found nothing. However, Soren found the hidden compartment of the elemental stone. It was empty. The fire elemental stone was taken away. This discovery suddenly made Soren feel troubled, because the 4 elemental stones could not be missing. If it was really taken away by someone, he did not know if he could get it back. Even if he could find it back, he did not know how much time it would take. Now Soren was in a race against time, and he could not afford to spend too much energy on it. If the fire elemental stone was really missing, he was afraid that he could only give up. Just when Soren could not find any clues at all, suddenly a voice came from above him. "Hey! Where did this rogue come from? How dare you come to my place and steal things?" The voice was very loud. But there was a hint of naivety in it. When Soren heard this voice, he almost turned over and retreated in an instant. At the same time, he pulled out his curved sword, icing death with a clang. He bent his body slightly and squatted down, ready to fight at any time. Me. When Soren raised his head and looked forward, his expression suddenly froze. Standing about 50 meters in front of him was a little lowly about 1.2 meters tall. She was wearing a golden princess dress with broken lace, inlaid with dazzling gems. Her pale blonde hair hung down naturally. Her face looked very cute, but her expression was old. At this moment, she stretched out a pink finger and pointed at Soren in front of her. She pouted and said, "Hey, I'm asking you a question. Why did you come to my place to steal things? Hey, are you mute? Are you an idiot? Are you scared by my domineering aura? Are you really scared? I can't be so unlucky, right? It's not easy to catch a human." Before Soren could speak, just when he was stunned, the little lowly in front of him had already said a lot of things. However, he seemed to know who she was. P.S. Today's 2 chapters. Take a break to recover your energy. Chapter 420. Brass Dragon. To be honest, Soren had a hard time connecting the cute little girl in front of him with an adult brass dragon. However, most dragons knew magic, so it wasn't that difficult for them to transform into human form. However, many dragons didn't like to transform. When they transformed into other creatures, their combat power would be weakened. Polymorph. Advanced polymorph. There were many spells that could transform into a human. It wasn't easy to retain combat power. Most dragons rarely transformed into human form. They thought that this form was too weak. However, small creatures also had their own advantages. Occasionally, some dragons would prefer to be in human form. In this regard, the good metal dragons preferred to transform, while the evil pentashade dragons preferred to be in their dragon form. There were many reasons for this. For example, the pentashade dragons had more enemies and needed to maintain combat power at all times. The metal dragons had stronger magic, so it was easier for them to transform into human form. Here, I have to mention the dragon's combat power ranking and some of their general characteristics. Evil pentashade dragons. Red dragon, one of the evil pentashade dragons. Its habitat was volcanoes. Its dragon breath was fire. Its natural disposition was arrogant. Its strength was ranked first. Blue dragon, sky dragon, one of the evil pentashade dragons. Its habitat was sand. Its dragon breath was lightning. Its natural disposition was belligerent. Its strength was ranked second. Green dragon, one of the evil pentashade dragons. Its habitat was forests. Its dragon breath was poisonous. Its natural disposition was cunning. Its strength was ranked third. Black dragon, one of the evil pentashade dragons. Its habitat was abyss. Its dragon breath was acid. Its natural disposition was berserk. Its strength was ranked fourth. White dragon, one of the evil pentashade dragons. Its habitat was ice. Its dragon breath was frost. Its natural disposition was dark. Its strength was ranked fifth. Weakest, good alignment metal dragon. Gold dragon, one of the good metal dragons. Its habitat was Dragon City. Its dragon breath was fire and lightning. Its natural disposition was arrogant. Its strength was ranked first. Silver dragon, one of the good metal dragons. Its habitat was Dragon City. Its dragon breath was frost. Its natural disposition was passionate. Its strength was ranked second. Brass dragon, one of the good metal dragons. Its habitat was sand. Its dragon breath was fire. Its natural disposition was talkative. Its strength was ranked third. Bronze dragon, one of the good metal dragons. Its habitat was water. Its dragon breath was lightning. Its natural disposition was curious. Its strength was ranked fourth. Copper dragon, one of the good metal dragons. Its habitat was barren mountains. Its dragon breath was poisonous. Its natural disposition was ranked fifth. Its natural disposition. These were the 10 most common types of pure-blooded dragons. There were also gemstone dragons, but unfortunately they were rarely seen in the material plane. Most gemstone dragons lived in elemental planes. Adventurers liked red dragons the most, many spoils of war, white dragons easy to deal with, and silver dragons affectionate by nature. Green dragons very cunning, brass dragons funny and talkative, and copper dragons, often mischievous, were the most hated. The metal dragons were slightly smaller than the pentashade dragons. Red dragons were the largest commonly seen dragons, but metal dragons had an advantage in spell casting. On the whole, the metal dragons were more powerful than the chromatic dragons. For example, the little lowly in front of Soren had always fought with the blue dragons, azure sky dragons, the most aggressive of the chromatic dragons. A dragon was still a dragon. Even though the person in front of him was a cute little lowly who didn't seem threatening at all, Soren didn't let his guard down at all. He stared at the other party's expression and slowly said, "I'm here to look for an elemental crystal stone." There was one thing that had to be mentioned. There was a very troublesome thing when dealing with the good metal dragons, and that was that they liked to use the spell, lie detection. If they were deceived from the beginning, there was a possibility that they would fight directly. Note, an important tip in the dragon's code. The little lowly in front of him raised her hand and gently lifted her light golden hair. She looked at Soren with her small mouth and blinked her pale golden eyes. She tilted her head and said, "It doesn't look like you're lying to me. Elemental crystal stone? Let me think about it. Yes, is it this thing?" The little lowly raised her hand and gently waved it. The space in front of her directly cracked open, and then a dazzling golden light could be seen. Then she stretched out her white and tender little hand and took out a fiery red elemental crystal stone. Seeing this scene, Soren's pupils shrank slightly. The other party had mastered the dimensional storage spell. It seemed that her spell-casting level was not low. The metal dragons had an advantage in spell-casting, and the most powerful gold dragon was even famous for being a scholar. Note, gold dragons have long whiskers on their faces, and they look very knowledgeable. Elemental crystal stone, fire. When he saw the fiery red elemental crystal stone, Soren's expression immediately changed. However, the little lowly standing in front of him smiled and put it away. She tilted her head and looked at Soren in front of her and said in a clear voice, "You want it? Even if you want it, I won't give it to you. It's mine. Everything on this mountain is mine, including the nearby desert. Now you're mine too." The little lowly laughed with an insufferably arrogant face. She was clearly so cute, but her expression was so infuriating. It made people feel like she was a silly Chinibu child who needed to be properly educated by an adult. However, Soren was not so relaxed. His expression was even a little nervous. His whole body was tense and slightly bent, ready to fight at any time. "Yes." The little lowly in front of him laughed arrogantly, and then her eyes fell on Soren. She said with a playful expression, "I'm going to take you back now. Are you going to resist? Resist? Or resist. Speechless. When Soren heard this, the corner of his mouth twitched. He slowly held the hilt of his sword and said in a deep voice, "Do I have a choice?" The atmosphere of battle was about to be triggered. The little loli tilted her head and chuckled, then said in a clear voice, "Of course not. It's not easy for me to catch a toy. Of course I have to play with it. No matter what kind of dragon it was. Whether it was good or evil, there was always one thing that was very annoying about dragons. That was, they were extremely arrogant and self-righteous. Basically, they never considered the thoughts of other creatures. They acted completely according to their own preferences, so if you wanted them to talk to you properly, you had to show them your muscles first. Even if it was a good dragon, if you didn't teach them a lesson, they wouldn't take you seriously. Hold human. The battle broke out in an instant. The cute little loli in front of him instantly flew up, raised her white little hand and pointed at Soren in front of her. There was no room to dodge. At such a distance, Soren was hit in an instant, and then a row of data appeared. Spell hit. You've been affected by the brass dragons. Hold human. Spell. Mandatory judgment immunity. Test of fortitude passed. Test of will passed. You're completely immune to the hold effect of this spell. It was completely useless. Soren's tenacity and willpower were not to be trifled with after practicing his internal strength for so long. It was not so easy for this kind of spell that wanted to knock people down in an instant to take effect on him. Shang. The cold light of the sword appeared. Even if it was a cute little loli in front of him, Soren didn't have the slightest intention to be merciful. Haste shoes activated. Soren's figure flew out in an instant and slashed at the opponent's head without any mercy. Advanced spell armor. The little loli in front of him looked a little surprised. She gently waved her little hand and opened an energy shield. Transforming into a human meant losing the natural advantage of a dragon's physical ability. How could Soren not seize the opportunity to close the distance? Arcane Missile *5. The overwhelming arcane missile shot out wildly. Facing the enemy in front of him, Soren didn't hold back at all and instantly activated the spell from his memory. When a dragon transformed into a human, under normal circumstances, the dragon's magic resistance would also be lost. The little loli's expression changed from surprise to surprise. She clapped her little hands and said, "You can even cast spells. This is great. Looks like you'll be more durable. You should be a very fun guy." She didn't even look at the arcane missile that filled the sky and let them fall on her body. The next moment, Soren's eyes almost popped out. He murmured, "This is impossible. How can a human have such high magic resistance?" Unscathed. It was as if the arcane missile never appeared at all. Chapter 421. Spell Resistance. It was an ability that was difficult to obtain through conventional means. Among all the known professions, the one with the highest spell resistance should be the monk. Legendary monks had an incredible spell resistance. They could stand in place and let a spellcaster with a profession level of 15 or below use up all their spell slots. Basically, as long as a spellcaster's profession level of 15 or below, it was impossible to threaten a legendary monk. This was because in front of the legendary monk's spell resistance, many spells could not even be resisted, and the effect of all elemental damage was so low that it could be ignored. This was an ability that was higher than any elemental resistance and had an effect on all spells. To a certain extent. This was also the foundation of the monk's cultivation. It was precisely because of the qualitative change that they were immune to any ordinary weapon damage. Soren had no spell resistance. Basically, most rogues did not have spell resistance. Elemental resistance could be obtained through training, but spell resistance was often innate. The monk's spell resistance was accumulated little by little in their daily practice. If others wanted to obtain spell resistance, they could only rely on legendary equipment or advance to the realm of transcendence. Saint form. It was basically impossible for spells below the third circle to threaten a saint in the form of a god. Dragons. They were creatures that were born with spell resistance. And the dragon's spell resistance was very high. Many times it could directly make them immune to some low-level spells. Even high-level spells may not be able to pass through their spell resistance. There was only one way to deal with them. The metamagic ability, spell penetration. If that did not work, then the legendary metamagic ability, legendary spell penetration. If that did not work, then add mana structure, legendary mana structure, and so on. If there was still no way, with the use of spells that reduced the enemy's spell resistance, There was always a way to break the enemy's spell resistance. Unfortunately, at present Soren could not do it. In fact, what puzzled him was that he had not encountered a dragon that transformed into a human in the past. In his memory, once a dragon transformed into another creature, its spell resistance would disappear. Because this transformation was equivalent to temporarily transforming oneself into a human, and humans were creatures that were born with no spell resistance. Hee hee. The little loli waved her little white hand nonchalantly and giggled. You're scared silly just like that? This kind of spell can't threaten me. Do you have any more powerful spells? Let's try it again. Soren's pupils shrank. In the next moment he pulled away and began to rapidly cast spells. Brute Strength. Maximum Spell. Cat's Grace, Extreme Spell. Melf's Minute Meteor, Extreme Spell. The legendary curved sword Icing Death disappeared in Soren's palm, and 2 dazzling flames were ignited. Soren's figure landed on the stone pillar of the altar. The multiple buffs greatly increased his combat power. Dazzling flames danced. The little loli's expression finally changed. She stared at the minute meteor flame in Soren's palm with a hint of panic. She then stuck out her little tongue and licked her lips. She seemed to be a little excited as she said, "Oh, I think I've gone overboard. I didn't expect you to know this spell. Tisk tisk hey. What are you going to do? Do you want to slay a dragon? I'm so cute. Do you really have the heart to do it?" She was clearly showing her weakness, but the expression on her face was still the same as before. Wah! The little loli suddenly laughed excitedly. Her figure was strangely suspended in midair. There was an evil smile on the corner of her mouth. She provoked, "Come on, weak human. Even if you know this kind of spell, you may not be able to defeat me. I'm the princess of the Brass Dragon Kingdom." The Brass Dragon Kingdom. Dragon Island? Soren seemed to have caught something for a moment, but there was no time for him to think. The little loli in front of him suddenly disappeared. When she reappeared, she was already above Soren. Dragon's Breath. A scene that completely subverted Soren's previous knowledge happened. The brass dragon in front of him could actually use the dragon's ability in human form. She took a deep breath and her little chest was bulging. Her mouth and cheeks were bulging high. When she opened her mouth and spat at Soren, a terrible dragon's breath fell from the sky. Raging fire spewed out. This seemingly petite body actually spat out a terrible dragon's breath that was comparable to an adult red dragon's breath. In an instant, it covered Soren's figure. Shadow Leap. Evade sight. Soren's figure fell under the reflection of the stone pillar on the altar, and then disappeared without a trace in the distorted shadow. The little loli stopped spitting out the terrible dragon's breath. She tilted her head and looked down. She raised her hand and touched her light golden hair. She had an expression of a cat playing with a mouse. She said excitedly, "Are you hiding? I'm very good at hide and seek." "Where are you? Let me see. Where are you hiding?" A strange shadow appeared. Soren's figure appeared in the shadow of a rock on the top of the mountain. He leaped up in an instant, and the burning micrometeor in his palm instantly hit the little loli in front of him. Boom! There was a violent explosion. The terrible penetrating power of Melf's micrometeor destroyed the energy shield on her body in an instant, and at the same time, there was a violent explosion on her body. A petite figure was sent flying backward. But soon she stabilized her figure, but the beautiful lace princess dress was a little tattered, revealing a white and delicate thigh. There were scorched marks. Soren's spell had obviously broken through her magic resistance. But the next moment something strange happened. The little loli's scorched skin quickly recovered after being hit by the spell, and she returned to her white and delicate appearance, as if she had not received any damage at all. Damn it! Soren's face changed slightly, and he disappeared in an instant. The dragon's regeneration ability is also preserved. What kind of monster was this? In the case of transforming into a human, she could still retain the ability of the dragon form. Not only could she use dragon breath, but she also had the regeneration ability of the dragon body. Well, this was definitely some kind of legendary transformation spell that he did not know about. Woo woo woo. The little loli covered her cute face as if she was crying, but there were no tears in her eyes. Instead, there was a competitive spirit like a child who had found some kind of interesting game. She pretended to cry for a while, then said with a small mouth, "You actually ruined my favorite dress. I only have this one dress. I'm angry. Now I'm serious." Buzz. Suddenly, a gust of wind escaped from the air. Dragon wing form. A pair of huge dragon wings appeared behind the little lowly. Her body was still in human form, but there was a pair of huge brass dragon wings behind her. She looked a bit similar to the Duke of Red Dragon's wife that Soren had seen before. Therefore, when the Duke of Red Dragon's wife transformed, a pair of huge red dragon wings also appeared behind her. However, the dragon wings of the little lowly in front of him were bigger and more threatening, just like the wings of a real dragon. Flying sand and stones. As the huge dragon wings flapped, a terrible wind swept out, and the sand in front of her was immediately blown away. Soren's trace was exposed in the wind. Even if he was still invisible, there was no way to hide his general outline from others. After all, the stealth of a rogue was not omnipotent. Being invisible to the naked eye did not mean that there was no other way to find him. Found it? There was a hint of excitement in the little lowly's eyes. Her petite body swooped down with the huge dragon wings and she shouted, "This time I'm serious. Please don't die like this." Dragon wing strike. A terrible power broke out in an instant. The huge dragon wings swept down with unparalleled force. The most threatening move of a pure-blooded dragon, the damage caused by the dragon wing strike was enough to move any profession. Chapter 422. The howling wind swept over. Facing the dragon wing attack launched by the little lowly in front of him, Soren's expression was not as panicked as before. He rolled back into the shadows and disappeared without a trace. No profession could withstand the attack of a dragon's wing. Even a wizard with a legendary force field or a barbarian with a legendary berserk would find it difficult to withstand the attack of a dragon's wing. However, it did not mean that he could not dodge it. Soren's shadow jump and shadow jump were not difficult to dodge the attack of the dragon's wing. Shadow jump. The terrible dragon wing attack swept across the entire altar. The little lowly's chest was slightly undulating, and her breathing was slightly rapid. This kind of attack was also a great burden for a dragon. Huh. The little lowly's figure rose into the air, tilted her head and looked down and whispered, "Hiding again? What good things do you have on you? I can't even force you to show up." Anti-detection cloak. Although there was no way to let Soren avoid the effect caused by the AoE attack, it made him invisible to the naked eye. The terrain was a bit unfavorable for him. If it were not for the fact that the desert area was too easy to reveal, Soren would have a greater advantage in the battle. Hee. The little lowly carefully looked around, and there seemed to be an energy shield on her body. She thought for a moment, then took a deep breath again and her little cheeks puffed up. Dragon breath? Didn't the giant dragon's breath need time to recover? How can she use dragon breath twice in a row? Dragon breath, sleeping gas. A strange breath came out of the little lowly's mouth, and then covered a large area in an instant. 2 types of dragon breath. Adult dragons with excellent talents could master 2 different types of dragon breath. One was elemental dragon breath, and the other was gas dragon breath. For example, the silver dragon could spit out ice dragon breath and paralyzing gas dragon breath. The range of the gas was quite large. Soren was almost instantly affected, and at the same time, a row of data appeared in front of him. You have been attacked by dragon breath. You have been attacked by dragon breath, sleeping gas. Test of compulsory immunity triggered. Test of fortitude passed. Test of willpower passed. You're completely immune to the dragon breath. It was ineffective. Soren's hard work in training his Nigong to increase his immunity finally paid off one day. He was now immune to the effects of the dragon's breath of deep sleep. The little lowly gasped in midair and muttered, "Is it still useless? To my surprise, this guy is actually quite strong." Shadow leap. A distorted figure appeared on her left side. Soren's figure suddenly soared into the air, and the minute meteor flame in his palm attacked her like a violent storm. He had been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. In the face of this little lowly whose strange methods completely overturned his previous attempts, he could only passively wait for her to exhaust a portion of her strength before counterattacking. Rumble. A violent explosion was heard. The powerful penetrating ability of Melf's minute meteor flame successfully broke through the energy shield. However, in the case of the dragon wing form, the little lowly immediately wrapped her petite body with her huge dragon wings as soon as she saw that the situation was not right. In this way, almost all the attacks fell on the huge brass-colored dragon wings. In fact, her body suffered almost no damage. Evade sight. Shadow leap. Soren's figure instantly landed, and then immediately appeared under the shadow of the little Loli's huge dragon wings. His whole body was like a taut bow. He suddenly jumped into the air and directly stabbed the enemy in front of him from below. The huge dragon wings spread open slightly. The petite body appeared, and some of the broken lace princess dress fluttered in the wind. Soren soared from below, and his curved sword drew a cold light. After the tip of the sword touched the tip of the opponent's foot, Soren suddenly turned around and put away his sword. The tip of his foot tapped on the huge dragon wings, and then slowly landed like a goose. Ah! When the tip of the sword touched the bottom of her foot, the little Loli's whole body trembled violently, but the pain that followed did not appear. Soren's control of his strength was quite subtle. He only touched her lightly, and her skin was not even scratched. The opponent did not want to hurt her. Yes. Soren did not intend to hurt her, and he did not have absolute confidence in defeating her. Since she could have dragon wings in the state of transformation, and retain the dragon's strong recovery ability, then it was very likely that she also had the terrifying defensive ability of a dragon. If this was the case, Soren's attack would at most slightly hurt her. On the contrary, if she was angered and transformed into a dragon, Soren's chances of winning would be greatly reduced. This little girl's strength was probably not low. She might be a brass dragon with a monster level of 25 or above. A gust of wind blew. The little Loli's figure flew down from mid-air, and then directly came to Soren's side. Her little face was red, and her little hand covered the corner of her dress. Her expression was a little shy and angry. "What did you just see?" "What did I see?" Soren heard this and frowned. "I was fighting with you just now, what else could I see?" His mind was slightly distracted. Soren subconsciously recalled the scene just now, and instantly realized that he really did see something. Damn it. It can't be. Seeing Soren's expression, the little Loli's face suddenly flushed red, and then she stared at him with dissatisfaction. Her little face also had an angry expression. Soren's expression was a little helpless. He quietly took half a step back and muttered, "What a surprise. Besides, isn't it the same if you fly around naked in the sky all day long in your dragon form?" The little Loli glared at him as if she was so angry that she wanted to bite him. She really did grind her teeth, but in the end she held it in. Her little face was red as she said, You're the one who flies around naked." The biological structure of a dragon. Although Soren had slain a dragon a few times, he really didn't study it in detail. However, in a battle situation he really didn't find any obvious weaknesses on the dragon's body. It was as if most of the dragon's body was covered by dragon scales. Thinking about it this way, it didn't really count as flying around naked. But Soren thought about it and looked at the little Loli in front of him. His expression suddenly became a little strange, and he secretly said to himself, "You were definitely flying around naked just now." Of course he didn't dare to say it out loud. Otherwise he might really have to fight with her. The little Loli stood in place and stared at him, and then the huge dragon wings gradually disappeared. She raised her white little hand and tidied up her tattered clothes, then she stared at him with dissatisfaction and said in a crisp voice, "Let's go. Come back with me." Soren's expression suddenly became hesitant. The other party's words made him a little uncertain. The little Loli turned around and looked at him. A fiery red elemental stone appeared in her palm. She gently weighed it in her palm and said proudly, "Don't you want this thing? I was just playing with you just now. If I really transformed into my dragon form, you might not be able to beat me. If you want it, then come back with me first. This thing doesn't seem to be very useful to me, but it's still my collection. If you want it, then you have to give me something in return." Speaking of this, the little Loli couldn't help but squint her beautiful big eyes. She looked up and down at Soren as if she was looking for treasures on him. A leopard can't change its spots. Soren was very clear about the character of a dragon. But the other party didn't seem to have much hostility. Soren hesitated for a moment, then gently nodded and said, "Okay." This little girl wasn't simple. Soren suspected that she came from the Dragon Island, but the Dragon Island in the material plane didn't have a kingdom. Country of the Brass Dragons. Such a name didn't seem to exist in the material plane. In the entire multiverse, there was only one place that could be called the Country of the Dragons. The plane that place was located in wasn't simple. Legend had it that the Time Dragon, who was just a baby dragon, had a challenge difficulty of 24/7. It lived in that plane. Chapter 423. Power. The unprecedented power gradually merged into his body. Soren stood motionless and his figure seemed to become hazy. The shadows around him seemed to cover him, and the picture of the whole space seemed to be a little distorted. The power of the shadows permeated the space, and the distorted shadows rushed to Soren's body like a tide, making his whole person seem to be isolated in another space. He seemed to be just a shadow, and his real body was no longer in the material plane, but in another world. So everything gradually disappeared, and Soren's figure returned to its original appearance. A large number of data appeared. The Shadow Dancer profession has leveled up to level 7. Received 32 DX 26 plus INT 22 to 10, asterisk 0. 5. Skill points, HP increased by 14, profession HP 8 plus, Constitution 22 to 10, asterisk 0. 5. You've received 1 free attribute point. The Shadow Dancer profession has leveled up to level 8. Received 32 DX 26 plus INT 22 to 10, asterisk 0. 5. Skill points, HP increased by 14, profession HP 8 plus, Constitution 22 to 10, asterisk 0. 5. You've received 1 talent point. Advanced to Legendary. You've received 1 extra talent point. The total profession level of the rogue has been raised to 15. You've automatically mastered the ability, Shadow Control. The profession level of the Shadow Dancer has been raised to level 7. You've automatically mastered the ability, Flexible Mind. Break through the critical point. The ability Danger Sense has been raised to the ability Danger Sense. Break through the critical point. The ability Reflex Evasion has been raised to the ability Reflex Evasion. He finally entered the realm of Legendary. Soren slowly opened his eyes and looked at the huge spider corpse in front of him, then turned around and looked behind him. The little loli tilted her head and sat on a rock looking at him. Her expression seemed to be a little surprised, but only a little surprised. When she saw Soren turn around and look at her, she couldn't help but smile and said in a crisp voice, "Congratulations. It seems that you've advanced to Legendary. But it's a bit troublesome for you humans to advance to Legendary. Unlike us dragons, we just need to fill our stomachs and have a good night's sleep." Dragons? The difference between the two species was too great. The only species that could sleep all the way to the Legendary realm was the dragons. Soren's Slaughter EXP had already reached a critical point. After killing the venomous spider in front of him, he finally had enough Slaughter EXP to advance to Legendary. So he did not hesitate to choose to advance directly. A row of data appeared again. Advance to Legend. You have obtained partial information about the Legendary ability, Shadow Domain. You have obtained partial information about the Legendary ability, Shadow Step. Advancing into the Legendary realm did not mean that one could directly master Legendary level abilities. Many Legendary level abilities required a lot of time to train. However, Soren had an obvious advantage after entering the Legendary realm. He could directly use the ability points he obtained to upgrade his Legendary level abilities. This was also the reason why he had been holding back until now. From now on, every talent point would become extremely precious because the talent points obtained after entering the Legendary realm could directly strengthen the Legendary ability. Note: ability points obtained by the wizard profession cannot be used to upgrade the rogue profession. This was the second time he received information about Shadow Realm. Soren now only needed to get the last information about Shadow Realm, and he could directly master this Legendary level ability. The quantitative change finally led to a qualitative change. At the moment when Soren broke into the Legendary realm, the rogue's combat ability had been comprehensively improved. However, because he was a wizard, some of the rogue's Legendary level abilities could not be mastered. Note: this is also the reason why there were only 2 information about Shadow Realm. The improvement after advancing into the Legendary realm was amazing. In addition to the new abilities, Soren's original abilities were also strengthened. Shadow Jump, 100 meters, Shadow Jump, 200 meters. Shadow Jump, 1 time, Shadow Jump, 2 times. Intuition Evasion, proficient in Intuition Evasion. Reflex Evasion, proficient in Reflex Evasion. Soren had been accumulating evasion abilities for a long time. The accumulation of battle after battle finally exploded at the moment he advanced into the Legendary realm. The 2 evasion abilities he mastered were upgraded at the same time. Proficient in Intuition Evasion, supernatural ability. From now on, you have an amazing intuition and prediction ability for any possible attack. It will be difficult for other rogues to sneak attack you, unless the local rogue's profession level is more than 4 levels higher than yours. Otherwise, you will easily see through their intentions and ignore the enemy's sneak attack. Note: this ability is effective for sneak attacks of any profession. Proficient in intuition evasion. As long as he had this ability, Soren could basically ignore other people's sneak attacks from now on. Only legendary rogues with a profession level of 25 or above could sneak attack Soren. As for other professions, it was basically impossible to sneak attack Soren. Note: this ability is often used to replace Sixth Sense. Proficient in reflex evasion, supernatural ability. From now on, your reflex ability will become more refined. You can perform a difficult reflex evasion test for any attack aimed at you. As long as you pass the reflex test, the damage you receive will be greatly reduced, including AoE spell attacks. You can rely on your amazing reflex ability to avoid most of the damage. Note: after dodging AoE spells, you will receive at most half of the damage. Proficient in reflex evasion. The specialty of a rogue was also a life-saving ability to avoid being directly killed by a wizard's AoE spells. As long as he mastered this ability, he could perform a reflex evasion test for AoE spells. With Soren's current basic attributes, it was not difficult to avoid the core area of the attack. From now on, whether it was Fireball or Ice Storm, even if Soren was directly hit by it, the damage he received would be greatly reduced. And these two evasion abilities were stacked, so the probability of physical attacks hitting Soren was also very low. Speaking of evasion, here it was necessary to count Soren's current abilities that increased evasion. They were flexible movement, roll evasion, proficient in reflex evasion, and proficient in intuition evasion. A total of 4 evasion abilities. Finally, it was the rogue's innate ability, flexible mind. Flexible mind, supernatural ability. From now on, if you are affected by the effects of charm, confusion, or illusion spells, you will have an additional chance to pass the test of immunity. Even if you fail the first test of immunity, you will not be affected by the effect of the spell because your flexible mind has produced a supernatural power that allows you to make a second test of immunity. If you fail the second test of immunity, you will not be immune to the effect of the spell. Ultimate enhancement. Soren, who originally had an innate advantage in charm and control spells, could now be said to be basically immune to such spells. Even a legendary wizard might not be able to charm and confuse him. From now on, Soren could basically ignore the effects of confusion and misdirection spells. It's almost done. Soren looked at his own data page and said to himself, my evasion ability has been stacked to the limit, and it can only be a legendary ability. It's enough to be immune to charm and confusion spells. Basically, I don't have to worry about being controlled by the enemy. 2 expertise points. Soren was a little hesitant about the 2 expertise points obtained from advancing into the legendary realm. Legendary ability. Most of the legendary abilities had prerequisites, including basic attributes, mastery of prerequisites, mastery of basic abilities, and so on. If he wanted to get the ability, legendary dual wielding, it was basically impossible to get the ability, dual wielding. As Soren had just advanced into the legendary realm, some of his abilities had not been completed yet, so the number of legendary abilities he could master was relatively limited. The most eye-catching legendary ability. It was actually not his own ability, but the legendary ability, Epic Sturdy, of the warrior class. Damn. Because of the importance of survival, Soren's constitution had always been not low. Now he directly obtained the prerequisite to master the legendary ability, Epic Sturdy. At present, the legendary abilities he could choose from were, Epic Sturdy, legendary ability. Your constitution has advanced beyond the realm of mortals. From now on, you can further strengthen your body, making yourself half as strong as a dragon. Your HP will be greatly increased, and most attacks will not be able to trigger the judgment of death. This ability can be strengthened up to 10 times, and each increase will increase your HP by 30 points. Note: prerequisites are 20 constitution and the sturdy ability. Maximum HP increase is 300 points. A top-notch tank ability. Increasing his HP to the limit was even more abnormal than the Saints. Unfortunately, Soren's requirements for this legendary ability were very low. Legendary evasion, legendary ability. Your evasion ability has been transformed into an instinct. Even if you don't discover the enemy's presence, Your body's instinct is enough to dodge the enemy's attack. From now on, any physical attack from the enemy, you will be able to dodge at least one attack. This ability can be triggered at most once per minute. This ability is a passive ability. Note: prerequisites are 25 agility, agile movement, reflex evasion, instinct evasion, roll evasion. Legendary evasion. From now on, it would not be so easy for any physical attack to hit Soren. The evasion ability of a legendary rogue was above most professions. About this legendary ability, someone had tested it before. A legendary monk, a legendary barbarian, and a legendary ranger. The three of them attacked at the same time. The damage they caused should have hit the target every minute, but it was strangely dodged by the opponent instinctively. That was to say, if a profession could only effectively hit the target once per minute, then no matter how long they fought, they would not be able to cause any damage to the target. Legendary evasion stacked with any evasion type ability. This was the last legendary ability to be activated. Legendary combat skills, legendary ability. From now on, your combat skills have reached the peak, and fighting has become an instinct for you. Any attack you identify will gain an additional legendary bonus of 1 point. Your combat instinct allows you to more easily exert your peak strength. This ability is a prerequisite for other legendary abilities. Note: no prerequisites. The only legendary ability with no prerequisites. But it was a prerequisite for insight into weakness. To master the legendary ability, insight into weakness, one must first master the ability of legendary combat skills. There were many kinds of legendary abilities. Soren only triggered a few of them because of his focus. There was no doubt that he chose legendary evasion. Soren was also determined to get insight into weakness, so his choice was basically confirmed. Legendary evasion and legendary combat skills. Note: the legendary data will be sorted out and posted in the public chapter after a while. There is one more update today. Chapter 424. Spider Forest. Soren walked in front to explore the way, and behind him was a lively little Lolita. In fact, Soren still didn't understand why this little Loli would suddenly decide to go on an adventure with him after listening to his ridiculous stories about how he poisoned teenagers and pretended to be pretentious dragons for a whole night. Fog. Dragons should be very lazy creatures, right? In Soren's memory, dragons spent most of their time sleeping. He had also seen some good dragons. Although they would deal with other intelligent creatures, he had never heard of them going on an adventure together. The little Lolita in front of him didn't know what was wrong with her. She actually said that she wanted to go on an adventure with him to see interesting things. And she also said that if Soren didn't agree, she would not give him the elemental stone, fire, and she planned to eat it in one bite. Note: she really took a bite at that time. It was said before. Brass dragons could eat almost anything and most of them could be digested. There was no doubt. If the little Lolita in front of him really ate the elemental stone, she might really be able to digest it completely. Finally, Soren could only helplessly take her with him, and he believed that the sentence, "since ancient times, chaos has always produced funny people," was correct. Soren, who was exploring the way in front, suddenly stopped. He turned around and made a gesture to the little Lolita who was humming and jumping behind him, and said in a deep voice, "There's someone in front. Don't make a sound." After advancing to legendary, Soren's abilities in all aspects had been improved a lot. Since there was a Lolita dragon who wanted to go on an adventure with him, he planned to get the last elemental stone as well. In this way he didn't have to trouble Gloria. Now that Soren was not in the outer islands, he could only feel at ease if Gloria was in Mordor City. The Lolita dragon behind him was definitely at the legendary level. With her, it would not be difficult to get the last elemental stone, wind. Maybe he could use her power to defeat the last 4 elemental elders. Hearing this, the little Loli immediately quieted down and tiptoed closer to Soren. She even climbed onto his back and whispered into his ear, "Who is it? Is there anyone nearby? Why didn't I notice it?" His ears were itchy. Soren turned around and glared at her, but when he saw the little Loli's smiling face, he sighed and said softly, "It should be an elf. There was a scouting team nearby. They seemed to be quite skilled." The spider forest was close to the elf kingdom. Soren didn't come all the way from the desert just for sightseeing. In fact, anyone with a bit of intelligence would be able to guess where the spider forest led to based on its name. That was right. The Underdark. Many of the spiders here were the offspring of the queen of spiders, Loltha's pets. For a long time, the battle between the surface elves and the underground drows had never stopped. The spider forest was the front line of the battle and also a passage connecting to the Underdark. The last elemental crystal stone was in the Underdark. It was also the elemental crystal stone that he knew the best because Soren had been active in the Underdark for a long time. Are we going to the underground? The little loli lay on Soren's back. Her beautiful big eyes were eager to move. She said excitedly, I haven't been to the underground yet. Is there anything fun down there? The Underdark. That was not something fun. Soren grabbed the little loli from his back and said in a deep voice, Be quiet. Let's find a way to sneak in. Don't get involved in the battle between the surface elves and the drows. The spider forest was very dense. Two silhouettes approached stealthily. Although the little loli was a giant dragon, her stealth ability was unexpectedly not low when she transformed into a human. Soren was quite familiar with this place because the spider forest was a leveling ground for adventurers with a profession level of 5 to 10. There were many poisonous spiders here, all of which were the offspring of the queen of spiders, Loltha's pets. The speed of their reproduction was a headache for many nearby races. Poisonous spiders, phase spiders, fire spiders, etc. There was a small path here that could lead to the Underdark. Soren planned to take the little lowly dragon into the underground world from there and see if a certain rumor had happened. Blood. The ground was full of blood. Accompanied by the sound of blood dripping, a burly barbarian with wounds all over his body knelt on the ground. His breath was very weak. Hideous wounds were all over his body. Many of them looked like marks left by sharp claws. Even with the strong physique of a barbarian, he was gradually approaching the edge of death. Hee hee. A strange and gloomy laughter sounded. The demigod vampire, who was wearing a dark red noble suit, slowly appeared. He looked at the body of a beautiful woman at his feet, lifted his foot and stepped on the beautiful head. He said playfully, Just with your group of trash. You want to join forces to defeat me? You're overestimating yourselves. Today I'll let you know the difference between a mortal and a god. I'm God. I'm God. A terrible force spread. The blood on the ground all moved like living creatures. The barbarian kneeling on the ground trembled. Facing the approaching demigod vampire, he suddenly said, Don't kill me. I never thought of competing with you for the power of the Dread Lord. Don't kill me. I can tell you where the first deity is. The first deity? The vampire Reinhardt stopped and asked with a slight frown, Where? He had been looking for that person for a long time. Unfortunately, there had been no clues. It was as if the other party had completely disappeared. Soren. The barbarian's face was full of fear and his voice trembled. The beheader, Soren. He is the first deity. You should have heard of him. The pirate king of the south coast. If it wasn't for the power of the Dread Lord, he wouldn't have been able to unify the south coast so quickly. Pirate king? The beheader, Soren? The demigod vampire's face showed a contemptuous smile and slowly said, So it's him. He's actually fighting for that pathetic power among the mortals. It seems that I've overestimated him. Speaking of this, his scarlet pupils looked at the barbarian in front of him. No. Don't kill me. The barbarian's body slowly fell. The demigod vampire looked around with a cold expression and ordered, Deal with this place. Don't leave any traces. Recently, the group of paladins has been really annoying. Damn paladins. They were like cockroaches that couldn't be killed. After killing a group, another group would appear immediately. Were they really not afraid of death? Some other vampire servants appeared and quickly began to clean up the blood nearby. The demigod vampire looked up in the direction of the sea and murmured, The south coast? Recently, the Church of Riches has been very hostile to me. But I still have to kill him as soon as possible. Soren. He shouldn't be a troublesome opponent, right? Patter. There was a slight sound of something falling to the ground. The hazy figure of the Hellpemer appeared behind the demigod vampire. He frowned and glanced at the blood on the ground. He slowly said, Reinhardt. Let's talk about that later. Important news has been set. The demigod vampire turned around when he heard the words. He smiled and looked at the Hellpemer. He opened his hand as if to hug the other party, but the Hellpemer avoided him. What news has been set? The Hellpemer pulled away a little. As a depraved and evil dark creature, vampires had certain habits. Ever since he learned something about them, he had been reluctant to get too close to Reinhard. The Helpheimer raised his hand and threw a file over, then said, "The god of rogues and half-elves has appeared. He's in the Underdark. Someone saw his miracles in the Underdark. This is an important opportunity for us." God? There was a hint of excitement on the demigod vampire's face. There was a sickly blush on his handsome face. He murmured, "A saint? I can finally taste the blood of a god." Chapter 425. Darkness. This was the strongest feeling anyone had when they entered the Underdark from the surface world. The entire narrow passage was pitch black, and the ground was slightly slippery due to the water stains. Dark green moss grew on the walls on both sides. Soren's night vision allowed him to easily see the surroundings, but the little lowly behind him was a little troublesome. Dragons had better vision than humans, but it was very limited when it came to dark environments. At most, they could reach the level of night vision, and it was very inconvenient for them to move in complete darkness. The Underdark was not completely dark. In fact, most of the areas in the Underdark were in the state of night vision. This was because there would be more or less light diffusing. It could be from fluorescent plants or from other sources of light. The specific difference could be understood as a night with no moon or stars. In this case, the range of human vision would be reduced to less than 3 meters. Many places in the Underdark were like this, so adventurers from the surface had to prepare torches or find some rare items that could enhance their night vision. This was not difficult for wizards. A normal night vision helmet cost around 300 to 500 Kindler coins. Those who had the ability to venture into the Underdark would not be short of money. Oh, it's so dark. The little lowly was lying on Soren's back. She moved her head close to his ear and whispered, "Are we not underground yet? Can't I cast Illuminate permanently?" "What? Are you planning to be a target in the Underdark?" "No." Soren refused without hesitation and said in a deep voice, "About 1,000 meters down, there will be fluorescent moss. You will be able to see things then." "What?" In the Underdark, a light source was a living target. Soren knew too well how much trouble it would cause if he lit a light source. Hooked horrors, giant lizards, mind flayers and so on. These creatures in the Underdark were very sensitive to light. Recklessly using light was the same as starting the farming mode that adventurers jokingly called. As they went deeper into the underworld, some stalactites began to appear above Soren's head. He did not know where the underground water source was, but he could hear the dripping sound of it. In the Underdark, any place near a water source was a battle zone. There were bound to be monsters that lived underground nearby. Oh, there seems to be a swamp nearby. The little lowly leaned on Soren's shoulder and seemed to dislike the smell. She wrinkled her nose and said, "I could feel the wet smell from afar, and there was also a rotten smell. No wonder those ugly and dirty black dragons like to stay underground." In the underground swamp. Basically, places with swamps in the Underdark would have very obvious light sources. As expected, Soren began to see light. It was dark green moss that emitted a faint fluorescent light. It was a mutated plant that was very common in the Underdark. The other was a mushroom that was a specialty of the Underdark. These two plants were quite tenacious and could even grow near volcanoes. Soren had seen fiery red moss near a volcano in the Underdark. The ground became a little wet. Soren gently put the little lowly down and then made a gesture to keep quiet. In the underground swamp, it was very easy for a kind of creature to exist in such a terrain. Swamp bearmen. Simply put, they were a kind of mutated human that was infected with a virus. They belonged to a branch of the beastmen. For some unknown reason they were bitten by other beastmen, or they were born with the disease of beastmen. In the end, they had the ability to transform into a beast or a beastman in combat. Lulu Mao, who Soren brought back, was a catwoman in the beastmen branch. Looking at Lulu Mao's talent, one could understand the combat power of the beastmen. Most adult beastmen were born between level 5 and level 8. About the beastmen. Soren should be most familiar with werewolves, tigermen, and bearmen. Among them, werewolves infected with the beastmen virus were the most common and could occasionally be encountered in the surface world. The rarer ones were tigermen and bearmen. Most of them lived in very rare areas. As for catwomen like Lulu Mao, they were basically on the verge of extinction. Needless to say, werewolves and tigermen had a natural strength adjustment of plus 16, which meant that as long as they transformed, their strength would directly increase by 16 points. Note, the strength of bearmen in the Underdark fluctuates between 27 to 36. In human form, their strength is not much different from ordinary people. Most of them are between 9 to 14. Even if it was just an adult bearman, their strength after transformation was higher than a strong brown bear. Huge footprints began to appear on the ground. They were about the same size as a brown bear. These mutated bearmen were between humans and beasts. The beastmen virus affected their intelligence, making them not much different from savages. Most of them lived in a tribal way. There were rumors that bearmen were the failed product of a drool transformation research experiment in a glorious arcane era, which eventually led to the appearance of the beastmen virus. Unfortunately, no one could prove it. Note: the appearance of the beastmen virus was earlier than the Arcane Empire, and the Arcane Empire also conducted research in this area. Thinking back to when he first met Lulu Mao, he could understand what kind of creatures these bearmen were. At that time she was really wild and untamed. I'll go and see the situation. Soren glanced at the little lowly behind him and whispered, maybe I can find a guide in the bearmen's territory. They like to capture other creatures as slaves and reserve food. Still. Soren's figure disappeared into the shadows. In the Underdark he was like a fish in water. He could enter stealth at any time. There were a lot of footprints on the ground. Soren preliminarily judged that there were 3 to 6 bearmen living here. With this scale, even the patrolling drow guards would not easily provoke them. The swamp terrain was a bit troublesome. But fortunately Soren still had spells. As he gradually sneaked in he soon saw a shabby shack. And a huge cage. There were obvious skeletons on the ground, which could be distinguished from drow, grey dwarf and gnome creatures. There was no bonfire, which meant that the bearmen in front of him were the most primitive creatures that ate raw meat and drank blood. There was no way to communicate with them at all. The beastmen virus could completely destroy the brain and turn them into beasts. Some of them could not even master the ability to transform back into a human for the rest of their lives. In the entire Underdark, there were very few beastmen that could be civilized and intelligent. In this regard Lulu Mao was a very smart beastman. Strong combat power and very low IQ. This seemed to be more prepared for war. There were some creatures in the cage. Soren saw an injured mutant bugbear, a dying grey dwarf and a dead hook horror. All of them were very difficult to deal with. But for the bearmen infected with the beastmen virus, they were all just food. Bang! Heavy footsteps could be heard. In Soren's field of vision, a huge monster that weighed more than 1,500 pounds appeared. It looked like a brown bear that walked upright. Its head was that of a bear, but part of its body had the outline of a human. It was very similar to a werewolf after transformation. No matter how one looked at it, their bloodline level was much lower than Lulu Mao's. It also meant that they were more primitive, more wild and more threatening. A bearman that can't transform back into a human. Soren could determine the state of the enemy at a glance. After the bearmen returned to their territory, their noses twitched and sniffed everywhere, as if they had smelled something. Wild intuition. In front of him was the lowest level of beastmen, the most brutal, vicious, and inhumane. They couldn't be considered intelligent creatures at all. They could only be considered as beasts that walked upright. Bearman, Beastman, Grade 3. Challenge rating 10, monster level 12+, has the ability to transform. Highest and lowest attribute points, 36 and 9, total attribute points, 85 to 100. Special abilities, Sturdy, Violent Strike, Powerful Slam, Rend, Claw, Roar, Transformation, Rage, Bloodthirst, Charge, Wild Intuition. Difficulty, S+. Most of the bearmen were Grade 3 creatures, but if you measured them as an ordinary Grade 3 enemy, it was basically an act of suicide. This was because their difficulty in Grade 3 was S+. Note: a team of fully armed adventurers with a profession level of 10 has less than a 10% chance of defeating a bearman after exhausting all their items. P.S. There is only one chapter today. Please let Fudo organize his thoughts. Mwah. Chapter 426. I'm preparing for a peak battle, a breakthrough attempt. The foreshadowing that should be buried is almost done. I hope to finish it before the end of the month. Please look forward to the true strength of the Arcane Empire. Poochie. Fresh blood spurted out. The bear shifter let out an angry and painful roar and slapped his back. The huge force set off a gust of wind, and a millstone-sized bluestone was smashed into pieces in an instant. Soren's figure leaped, and his curved sword Icing Death slashed through the gap between the bear shifter's arms again. Accompanied by a cold light, another wound appeared on the bear shifter's body. Tremendous strength, sluggish movements, and a brain that wasn't considered smart. For Soren, who had now advanced into the legendary realm, dealing with this kind of enemy was actually very simple, because it was too difficult for the bear shifter to hit him. If it wasn't for the fact that most of the bear shifter's physique was higher, he was afraid that his initial backstab would have been able to finish off the target. But now the bear shifter's injuries weren't light either. Its chest kept bleeding. Its huge body seemed incomparably ferocious, but every time it attacked, it hit the empty ground. If it was a tiger shifter with a high threat, it might still be able to touch Soren's body, but the bear shifter didn't have much to think about. Plop. A dull sound of something falling to the ground sounded. Soren slowly withdrew his curved sword, and stared at the dead body of the bear shifter on the ground. After losing its vitality, its body gradually shrank, and finally became a human man with thick hair all over his body. His face was very rough, and his appearance was similar to that of a savage. It was only after his death that he turned into a human form. The side effects of the bear shifter disease were very big. If one's innate strength was not enough, it was very likely that they would be like the bear shifter in front of him. They would be an ignorant beast for the rest of their lives, and only death could make them return to their original form. In addition, there was another very dangerous aspect of the bear shifter. Low-level bear shifter like the one in front of him would carry some kind of terrible virus. If one was injured by them, there was about a 10% chance of being infected with the bear shifter disease. At this time, one would have to go through a compulsory test of immunity. Or else, it was possible for them to be infected with the beast virus. After a period of feverish and painful transformation, it was possible for them to transform into beastmen on a certain night of a full moon or at any other time. During the transformation process, there was also a mandatory constitution test. If it failed, it would cause the user to go crazy or even die. Most of the beast viruses were carried by low-level war creatures. Their bodies contained the most primitive virus. If they were the offspring of a beastman such as Lulu, an extremely rare existence, then the beastman virus would transform into their own genetic lineage. Lulu's main body was still in human form. There was no sign of her transformation, so it was very likely that her father or mother was a purebred human. Note 1, on the mutated form of beastmen and the mutation after reproduction, Chapter 6. Note 2, on reproductive isolation and the probability of interracial reproduction of war creatures, Chapter 3, research report on mixed werewolves. Soren wasn't afraid of these viruses. Regardless of whether it was the beast virus or the undead corpse poison, it was impossible for him to be immune to them with his current endurance, vitality, and will. Unless Soren was infected by the virus while he was dead, he could basically ignore them. Come out. Soren slashed open the cage next to him and said to the gray dwarf imprisoned inside, "Where are you from? Are you familiar with the surrounding terrain?" Bang. Just as Soren opened the cage, the bugbear suddenly rushed out and ran out of the swamp without saying a word. It didn't know if it was out of its mind, but it actually thought that it could escape from Soren's hands. What greeted it was a cold flash of a sword. Soren swung his sword and chopped off the bugbear's head. The blood that gushed out splashed onto the gray dwarf's body. The gray dwarf couldn't help but shudder and then stutter, "Your Highness. Your Highness. Don't kill me. I'll tell you everything I know. Please don't kill me. No matter where you want to go, I'll lead the way for you." Light footsteps could be heard. The little loli tiptoed from outside. When she saw the corpse on the ground, she immediately clapped her hands and swaggered over. She pouted and said, "Soren, I'm bored to death. The environment here is so disgusting. Why don't we go out first?" As a brass dragon that lived in the desert, she naturally hated the swamp environment. "Okay." Soren nodded slightly and put away his sword. He stared coldly at the gray dwarf in front of him and said in a deep voice, "Lead the way. There should be a road that leads to Gleck City nearby. Take us there first." The gray dwarf cowered and walked forward. Soren followed behind with an expressionless face. The little loli was still carefree and happy, but she didn't like the environment here. About 1,000 meters away from Soren, a slender masked woman stood in the darkness. Her eyes were slightly shining as if they contained some kind of mysterious power. There seemed to be an invisible force field around her body. Anything that got close to her, including the wind, was isolated. She stared at Soren's position. Her gaze seemed to penetrate through space and directly locked onto Soren's figure. Die. Heavy footsteps sounded. Behind the slender woman, a burly man appeared. He carried a heavy battle axe with one hand. His terrible muscles seemed to contain infinite power. The luster of the adamantine was mixed with some kind of indescribable power. Just a glance could tell that it contained a strong lethality. This was a very terrible barbarian. There was almost no need to guess that his strength was already above the legendary realm. He spoke the ancient common language, a language that was used thousands of years ago. It was a language composed of 36 rune letters. The name was very special. However, if it was converted into the current syllables, it should be possible to call this masked woman Dai. The barbarian slowly walked behind her and said in a deep voice, "What are you doing?" Ah, there was a chuckle. The masked woman turned around and looked at the barbarian. She smiled and said lightly, "I accidentally found a good rogue. He's a very interesting little guy. And he's followed by a brass dragon in human form. Such a combination is quite rare." The barbarian frowned and said in a deep voice, "Don't complicate things. We didn't come out of Sigil City to play this time. This is the first official action of the Godslayer. Our bait has attracted the target. The Queen of Spiders has turned her attention to the bait. To deal with this terrible existence, I believe you should know the consequences of failure. The Queen of Spiders, the supreme existence of the Underdark, the Queen of the Drows, the ruler of the Abyss, a terrible god with great divine power." Dai's expression gradually became serious. She withdrew her gaze and said slowly, "I know what's important. I won't delay business. It's just that this little guy's soul is very special. I've never seen such soul power. Dark, cruel, ruthless. But there's an indescribable light. I even saw the glory of sacrifice. It's a little fascinating." The masked woman smiled a little frivolously, then slowly spread out her palm and said in a cold voice, "War chess Note 2, simulation activated. Activate, arcane war chess, scanning mode." A cluster of pure energy appeared. Then, an invisible energy field spread out in all directions. Psionic energy field activated. Soul scanning activated. Activate terrain simulation. Scan the surrounding 100 kilometers. Thaling 7 took over command of the war chess system. Beginning terrain simulation. Tactical map construction. Scanning the nearby space nodes. Psionic energy field spread. Activate psionic resonance. Synchronized psionic transmission established. Calculating space waymarks. Semi-plane synchronization locked. Simulation of a different dimension teleportation channel. Teleportation node rune. Arcane power armor node 3, standby. Thaling 6 took over command of space waymarks. Godslayer plan activated. Target, Queen of Spiders, Lolth. Note 1. Sigil City is a very mysterious existence in the entire multiverse. Legend has it that it is an important node of the multiverse and has portals that connect countless planes. The Lady of Pain is the absolute ruler of Sigil City and has terrible power that mortals can't imagine. However, Sigil City has been closed for a long time, and now there are very few existences that can enter Sigil City. Sigil City rejects all gods, and even gods with great divine power can't easily set foot in this place. Note 2. Arcane War Chess is a tactical simulation game that originated from the Arcane Empire. Now this special technology has been lost, and only a few wizard organizations have a partial simulation ability. When Soren was looking for the second elemental stone, the elemental djinn he met mentioned this, war chess. The monsters it summoned at that time simulated the rules of arcane war chess. Note 3. The magic-powered armor was a terrifying war machine during the Arcane Empire in all the previous information. Chapter 427. Soren, who was moving forward, suddenly stopped. His muscles tightened, and his palm held the hilt of icing death in an instant. He was ready to fight at any time. The Lolita dragon next to him was shocked by Soren's action, but in the next moment she quickly disappeared. Her petite figure appeared in mid-air, and her whole body was shrouded in an invisible energy field. The only one who was unaware was the captured Duergar, who was still looking around blankly. Psionic energy field. Soren's expression was very solemn. His perception was raised to the limit, and his telepathy was also paying attention to the surroundings. He slowly said, "There's a psionic warlock casting nearby." The little Lolita dragon's expression was very serious and she whispered, "Legendary." No. It should be above legendary. I felt a terrible power like a psionic storm. The coverage of the psionic force field is quite wide. How is that possible? There can't be such a powerful psionic warlock in the material plane. Both of them were ready to fight at any time. However, there was no abnormal situation nearby, and the sudden burst of psionic force field only existed for a moment. When it calmed down, Soren even suspected that he had just seen an illusion. However, if there was no Lolita dragon next to him, Soren might think that it was an illusion, but now that the Lolita dragon next to him also felt it, it was absolutely impossible that it was an illusion. There was indeed a very powerful psionic warlock casting a spell, and the coverage of the psionic force field was so large that it was a little beyond Soren's imagination. Such a coverage area. According to Soren's past memory, if it was really done by a psionic warlock, then his profession level might be above level 30. A level 30 psionic warlock? How was that possible? Soren had never encountered such an existence during the time of troubles. There were probably only a few creatures in the astral plane that could reach this level. Was it an illusion? The Lolita dragon shook her little head and landed on the ground. She stared at Soren and murmured, "Did you feel it? Just now. A very powerful psionic force field." Soren nodded slowly and said in a deep voice, "I felt it. It's impossible for both of us to be hallucinating at the same time. There might really be a psionic warlock nearby. It's best to be careful later." The Lolita dragon nodded her little head gently and said softly, "Could it be a Githyanki? The knowledge in my memory tells me that Githyankis often appear in the Underdark, and there are many powerful psionic warlocks among them." Surprise. Soren looked at the Lolita dragon next to him in surprise and said slowly, "It's possible. Githyankis do appear frequently in the Underdark." It seemed that this Lolita dragon was quite knowledgeable. Most of the time, a dragon's hereditary memory would take a long time. Judging from her current form, she probably hadn't fully awakened all her hereditary memories. This meant that her bloodline was most likely from the Dragon Nation. Githyanki. Damn it. I don't know much about the Underdark before the Avatar Crisis. Is there really a powerful psionic warlock visiting the Underdark from the astral boundary? Which astral boundary traveler would it be? Soren tried his best to search his memory, but unfortunately he could get very little information. When he first came to the Underdark, it was already after the Avatar Crisis. The gap between the two was actually quite big, which was why he needed a guide. The difficulty of the Underdark was much higher than the surface world. Before the Avatar Crisis, only a few adventurers could enter it. About this period of time, a lot of information was just hearsay because not many people could intervene in this level of field at that time. Soren also reincarnated in the river Styx before he became a legend, so there was a partial gap in the information level. Be careful. Soren looked around, motioned the Grey Dwarf to continue moving forward, and said slowly, "Psionic warlocks are not easy to deal with. We have to be ready for battle at any time." The group continued to move forward. But until Soren found the way to the city of the Grey Dwarves, they didn't encounter any abnormalities. Everything just now was like an illusion. They didn't encounter any enemies, nor did they see any traces of psionic warlocks. The psionic force field disappeared. It only existed for a moment and then disappeared completely. The Underdark, the crossing passage. The demigod vampire threw away the body of the drows in his hand, raised his hand and gently wiped the corners of his mouth, and said contemptuously, "This group of dirty and licentious drows. Their blood is as disgusting as feces." At the feet of the Helpheimer was the body of another female drow. He glanced at the demigod vampire coldly and said slowly, "Then why did you bite her?" Reinhardt spat softly as if he still felt a little disgusted. He turned and glanced at the Helpheimer next to him. A frivolous smile appeared on his handsome face and he said lightly, "We are not familiar with this place, so we need a servant to lead the way." A drop of blood slid down. With some kind of evil and depraved power, the body of the drows at his feet suddenly trembled. "Master." A cold and ruthless voice sounded, and the dead drow stood up. Her pupils were gray, and her whole body was like a puppet, humbly kneeling at the feet of the demigod vampire. The demigod vampire smiled slightly, raised his hand and tapped on the forehead of the drows and slowly said, "What a simple thing. Now we can let her lead the way." The god of half-elves and rogues. I can't wait any longer. What should the blood of a god taste like? It must be very wonderful. The Helpheimer looked at him blankly, gently touched the magic flute in his palm and said coldly, "Don't be complacent. This is the territory of the Queen of Spiders. It is not ruled out that she will also notice this prey. This existence is not to be trifled with. Even her avatar is enough to kill us easily. Reinhardt's body trembled, and then he seemed calm and said, "It shouldn't be. For the Queen of Spiders, a weak god should not be enough for her to personally take action." The Helpheimer did not speak but continued to walk forward. After a while he said, "Don't forget her greed and brutality. Besides, she may be interested in anything related to elves." The demigod vampire paused for a moment and then said, "But that's a half-elf, and it has nothing to do with the drows." The Helpheimer looked around and then said, "I know. So we'd better pray that we don't meet her. The recent changes in the drows may be because she has passed on some kind of oracle. In addition, I heard that a group of paladins with good strength have also come to the Underdark. I don't know what the purpose of these guys is. What could possibly attract them here in this dark zone that is filled with evil and chaos? Paladins?" The demigod vampire frowned and then said with a disgusted face, "What a group of guys. An unknown place." A towering adept's tower stood on the plains, piercing the clouds. At the top of the wizard tower, there was an astrology platform with countless mysterious and ancient runes engraved on it. At this moment, a figure in a gray robe stood in the center, and his sight seemed to pass through space and looked at the underground world. "It's begun." He gently raised his finger, and a metallic luster appeared on his fingertips. As the faint light sprinkled in front of him, his appearance gradually became clear. It had a metallic face and a metallic body. The silver-white metal was like human skin, and it changed slightly with his expression. There was a special device on his chest. It was a clock that could not be described in words. There were countless tiny runes on it, and there were special marks on the 12 notches. It looked like the pattern of the 12 zodiac signs. The clock was still ticking. He looked into the distance and murmured, "I don't have much time left. Maybe the brilliance of the arcane can bloom again. Maybe everything will be buried by time. Only time will tell us the answer. Only time will tell everything." "Thank you, Dirk Lena. May you be eternally in time." A space crack leading to the unknown place. In front of this man made entirely of metal, there was a space as bright as the galaxy. In the center of the space there was a dragon sleeping. With its breathing, time and space gradually distorted. Time dragon. There was only one existence in the entire multiverse that could distort time and space like this. Chapter 428. There was a faint smell of sulfur in the air. The environment in the Underdark was very bad. Some places even had underground volcanoes that could erupt at any time. Especially when they were close to the city of the Grey Dwarves, the faint smell of sulfur was even more obvious. The Grey Dwarves inherited the dwarves' usual attitude of seeking death. They liked to build their cities near volcanoes, or directly dig through the ground to draw out the underground magma. In terms of forging skills, the Grey Dwarves' skills were far superior to the surface dwarves because they often encountered blacksmith masters who could forge +3 and +4 weapons. Unfortunately, the materials of the weapons in the Underdark were special. Many of them would become a pile of scrap iron if they were brought to the surface world. The Grey Dwarves were the best source of slaves in the Underdark. They had been ruled by the Mind Flayer for a long time. Although they were now free from the control of the Mind Flayer, there were still a large number of captured Grey Dwarven slaves in the city of the Drows. Slavery was deeply ingrained in this race. Even if they broke free from the control of the Mind Flayer, they were still regarded as a source of slaves by many creatures. In a city of drows, the number of Grey Dwarven slaves may reach 1/10 or 2/10 of the total population. The light dimmed again. Soren heard the sound of flowing spring water. After passing through a towering stone forest, a white mist appeared in front of them. Soren remembered this place. Although the environment in the Underdark was very bad, there was also a good thing. Hot springs. In fact, there were many hot springs in the Underdark that could be developed, and the one in front of them was the largest open-air sulfur hot spring nearby. The drows advocated intrigue, the Grey Dwarves' brains were full of iron lumps, and the mainstream races in the Underdark did not seem to realize the value of hot springs. In the end, a team of adventurers from the surface world carried out a simple development and turned this place into a gathering point for exploring the Underdark. "The water here seems good." The Lolita dragon sniffed with her eyes closed. She seemed to like the smell of sulfur. The temperature of the spring water was actually quite high, about 50 degrees, but for a dragon it was negligible. The little Lolita reached out and took a sip of the spring water, then turned around and looked at Soren with wide eyes. She said hopefully, "Soren, can I take a bath here?" There was no sun in the Underdark. Therefore it was easy to lose track of time. Many cities in the Underdark had a light source, which was actually some kind of obelisk that emitted light. Soren roughly calculated the travel time and nodded. "Let's rest here for an hour. I'll go prepare some food." With that, he kicked the gray dwarf beside him. Soren turned around and asked in a low voice, "Are the furnaces in Glex City still lit up? Furnace fire?" The gray dwarf's expression was a little blank, but he still hurriedly nodded. "The fires in Glex City have never been extinguished. Is it still lit up?" Soren fell into deep thought, then nodded and said, "Go set up a campfire and prepare some food. I don't think you're stupid enough to think of running away, right?" The gray dwarf quickly nodded. Soren glanced at him and casually tossed a torch over, asking him to take out some dried meat rations. "The fires in Glex City haven't been extinguished yet." Soren sat down as if he was thinking about something. He murmured, "That means the divine artifact hasn't been completed yet. I don't know how long it will take these gray dwarves to make that thing. But it should be before the start of the Avatar crisis, right?" Soren thought about his own matters. After about a while, Lolita Dragon's light figure came from behind. "It's so comfortable." Lolita Dragon used her white little hands to tidy up her pale blonde hair and tied it into a pair of beautiful ponytails. Then she blinked her big eyes and looked at Soren. "Don't you want to take a bath? The water below is so comfortable. Soaking in it makes me feel lazy." Soren shook his head gently. The group stayed in place for a moment, then continued on their way to their destination. Before leaving, Soren couldn't help but look at Glex City again. There was a divine artifact in this city. Or rather, a divine artifact that was being made. About 10 years ago, the gray dwarves of this city discovered a large vein of mithril while they were in the process of mining. This was quite a shocking amount of wealth. If it was leaked out, it might even lead to a crazy attack from the drows. Therefore, the ruler of Glex City, Greybeard, blocked the news for a while and restricted all the gray dwarven craftsmen who knew the truth, not allowing them to leave. Since then, the fires in Glex City had never been extinguished. Greybeard was using the mithril to forge a powerful equipment. Because they had been enslaved by the Mind Flayer, many gray dwarves had a certain level of psionic ability. Greybeard was the best among all the gray dwarves. Not only was he a legendary psionic warlock, profession level 21, but he was also a level 5 berserker and level 5 wizard at the same time. Greybeard made a mithril chain armor. It didn't affect his casting at all. Each buckle was engraved with runes, and all of them were personally engraved by him. Soren didn't know the specific attributes of this divine artifact. However, he knew that this mithril chain armor's defensive ability was equivalent to a full body plate armor plus 3. The entire mithril chain armor's buckles were engraved with runes. In addition to its powerful defensive ability, it was also enchanted with a lot of powerful spells. The most important thing was that this mithril chain armor was as light as a feather. It wouldn't interfere with the caster's battle at all. Even a wizard could easily wear it. This was why it was a divine artifact even though it wasn't made by a god. Greybeard wasn't easy to deal with. What was more troublesome was that he was the ruler of Glex City. He was also a powerful legendary profession. Therefore, even if Soren had some plans for this divine artifact, he didn't have a clear idea. However, there was still some time before the divine artifact was completed. Soren felt that if he could enter the realm of the gods, he might have a chance to get his hands on this divine artifact. As a rogue and a wizard, it wasn't easy for Soren to find a divine artifact that he could use. Greybeard might not be one of the strongest people in the Underdark, but in the entire Underdark, he seemed to be the only one who could reach more than 400 points in both magic equipment forging and alchemy at the same time. As he got closer and closer to his destination, after solving some small problems, Soren finally saw the outline of an altar. It was already very broken. However, there were still powerful energy fluctuations around it. The last elemental stone. Soren's expression couldn't help but be slightly excited. At the same time, he turned around and looked at the Lolita dragon next to him. Chapter 429. The air seemed to be getting heavier. In the dark passage, a tall and burly figure slowly walked out. It was an orc with a strange appearance. Only a small tuft of hair was left standing. It was more than 2 meters tall, and its muscles were filled with terrifying explosive power. Unlike the exaggerated muscles of the barbarians, The orc's muscles were very refined. If one looked carefully, one could see that every muscle on the orc's body was quite powerful. It even contained more explosive power than Sauron's. The Sword Saint has arrived at the target location. The orc looked around with cold eyes, and then an invisible light appeared in its palm. It said directly in its mind, "There are no obstacles at the target location. Do you want to wait here?" Time passed little by little. About a minute or two later, a frivolous female voice sounded slowly, "The Sword Saint is on standby. The bait has entered the reserved area. The praise dog has appeared. Pay attention to the priests of the Queen of Spiders Church. There is no sign of the prey yet." The orc slowly nodded and replied, "The Sword Saint understands. Is the elemental pool fully charged? The elemental fission wave blade can't be charged to the 5th grade of the artifact. I'm not sure if I can break the Queen of Spiders' celestial force field." The frivolous female voice sounded again and said lightly, "Extracting the energy of the half-plane. It is estimated that the energy will reach its peak in 24 hours. The orc nodded again and said, "Understood. The Sword Saint is on standby, waiting for orders." Pada. Light footsteps came from the side of the passage. The Sword Saint, who stood motionless, suddenly turned around and looked at the darkness not far away. The figures of the demigod vampire and the Hellpemer appeared in front of him. Shock. Not only was the Sword Saint a little shocked, but the demigod vampire and the Hellpemer were also a little shocked. Both sides didn't notice each other in advance. This meant that their hiding ability was not much different. They didn't notice each other until the distance was close enough. The Sword Saint. The demigod vampire just glanced at it, and his expression changed slightly. Telepathy directly echoed in the Hellpemer's mind, and he said in a deep voice, "The Sword Saint is above the legendary level." The Hellpemer's answer was also very quick, "Hybrid orc. Doesn't seem to be from the material plane. It could be from the astral world." The demigod vampire's face remained unchanged, but his heart was in turmoil. He said solemnly, "Astral Sword Saint?" The Hellpemer quietly held the magic flute tightly and replied, "It's possible." The demigod vampire said, "It seems to be very strong." Hellpemer, "Stronger than me." The demigod vampire said, "How is that possible? Then wouldn't he be?" The Hellpemer replied, "I can't determine his exact strength, but I'm sure he's from the astral world. There's some remnant astral world energy in his body." The demigod vampire said, "Could it be that they were attracted by the god of half-elves and rogues?" Hellpemer, "It's possible. It seemed that there weren't many things that could attract such an existence other than the realm of the gods. But the god of rogues and half-elves didn't seem to match his power. Unless he's only interested in the godhood." The demigod vampire said, "Since he's an opponent, why don't we kill him in advance?" Hellpemer, "The chances of winning aren't high. Moreover, we haven't even seen any traces of our prey yet, and we've already exchanged blows with an astral sword saint. Don't you think this is a bit of a loss?" The demigod vampire said, "It seems that this battle will be very difficult. Are many powerful people attracted by the godhood?" Hellpemer, "I don't know. Let's act according to the circumstances." On the other side, after the orc sword saint found the two figures in front of him, he immediately used telepathy and said, "Unknown targets found. One of them is in the form of a saint, and the other seems to be the legendary Hellpemer. Would you like to clear the target as an obstacle?" After a while, in the mind of the orc sword saint, there was a cold voice that sounded like metal rubbing against each other, and it slowly said, "Don't act rashly. It's possible that they are other people attracted by the bait. If the other party is not hostile, let them leave. I have asked Butterfly to include them in the monitoring of the psionic force field. A bait may not be able to attract the prey to attack personally. I am recalculating the battle plan. The target of the saint form is the god of vampire, and it will be listed as the second bait to attract the queen of spiders." The orc sword saint nodded to the demigod vampire not far away and said in his mind, "Sword Saint understands." There was a short silence. The demigod vampire glanced at the orc sword saint who nodded slightly at him and said telepathically, "It seems that he has no intention of fighting with us. Hellpemer, that's best. We will leave directly from the side." The demigod vampire, "Are we leaving just like that? The astral sword saint is very rare. Don't you want to test his strength?" Hellpemer, "The sword saint is not testing the enemy, it will only become a battle of life and death. If we fight with him, the outcome will only be in a few seconds. This is not testing the enemy but fighting with his life." The demigod vampire, that's true. Then let's leave. But it's really a pity. I have never encountered such an enemy. It seems that the recent changes have attracted many strong people traveling in the astral world. Helpheimer, let's go. Such an astral world traveler rarely acts alone, and there may be companions nearby. There was not much contact between the two sides. The demigod vampire and the Helpheimer cautiously left through the side passage, while the orc blade master stood motionless. He waited until the target had completely disappeared before he retracted his gaze. The target has left. A magnetic female voice sounded, understood. The target has been included in the detection range of the psionic power field. 80 kilometers away from the location of the orc sword saint. An expressionless monk stood on a towering stone pillar. His gaze was focused on the darkness in front of him as if he was observing something through the fog. Monk has arrived at the designated location. Monk, stand by. A frivolous female voice sounded, stand by. Did you find anything unusual? The monk replied, traces of wax demon have been found. The prey may have appeared, but the target's concealment ability is too high and did not appear in our detection range. Another cold metallic voice sounded, Thaling number 5 has taken over the detection authority within 50 kilometers. Monk, prepare for battle. After the target appears, immediately clear the other obstacles nearby and ensure that there are no other disturbances near the prey. The monk nodded and said, Monk understands. 50 kilometers away from the position of the monk. There seemed to be something in the twisted shadows. In front of him was a team of fully armed drows. On the left and right were petrifying lizard knights. Male drow rangers were scattered to protect them. In the middle was a group of female drow priests and spellcasters. Behind what looked like a drow matriarch, there were some terrible monsters with hideous faces. They were the legendary spider elves. A terrible monster with the upper body of a drow and the lower body of a giant spider. A twisted mind. A crazy desire for blood, and a terrible desire for destruction after the distortion of hatred. The spider elves were the losers of the internal struggle of the drows. They were transformed into such monsters by the power of the Queen of Spiders. They were also one of the most troublesome and annoying monsters in the Underdark. The shadows gradually disappeared. The team of drows was still moving forward, but there was a sight in the dark watching them. The rogue has found the target. A drow matriarch, petrifying lizard knights, and spider elves have appeared. We are sure that the prey has appeared, but the specific location of the target cannot be detected at present. A cold metallic voice sounded. Keep your distance, don't get too close to the target. Report the target's location at all times. The Queen of Spiders is likely to be hiding in the team. There was a slight trace in the dark. Understood. The elemental altar. Soren looked at the last elemental altar in front of him and could not help but clench his curved sword nervously. As long as he got the 4th elemental stone, wind, then he could proceed to the final challenge. The 4 elemental elders. After combining the 4 elemental stones, the wind elemental elder, the water elemental elder, the fire elemental elder, and the earth elemental elder would be summoned. They were all legendary level creatures. Only by defeating all of them would one be able to obtain the final spoils of war. A sealed fragment of divinity. This fragment of divinity came from an ancient evil god. Although it was only a broken fragment of divinity, it could still promote someone to the realm of demigod. Divinity plus divinity equals demigod realm. Soren had enough divinity in him. As long as he had divinity, he could advance to demigod at any time. Perhaps there would not be too much of a change in strength. However, there was one thing that was very important to Soren. As long as he advanced to the realm of demigod, Soren would be able to completely ignore the legendary spell, Time Stop. This legendary spell would be completely ineffective against him. No matter what level of spellcaster he faced, he would not sit still and wait for his death. This was the biggest benefit of advancing to the realm of demigod. Moreover, as long as Soren could raise his divinity level to minor divinity, then he could transform himself into saint form. Basically, he could ignore all spells from circle 1 to 3. The saint form had high resistance against low-level spells. Many spells could not even break through the energy field of the saint form. Only when he advanced to the realm of demigod could he be considered to have stepped into the realm of gods. P.S. There is one more update today. Please recommend it. Chapter 430. It was different from all the other elemental altars. This last elemental altar was almost a ruin. The stone pillars around the altar seemed to have been violently destroyed. Soren also found some traces that were not easy to judge. The initial estimate was that it should be more than 1,000 years old. Unless Soren's knowledge was involved in the field of archaeology, there was no way to analyze the situation here for the time being. But what Soren didn't expect was that he didn't see anything, but the Lolita dragon beside him noticed something. This place seems to be a temple. The Lolita dragon fiddled with her long pale blonde hair, a pair of beautiful ponytails swaying. She wrinkled her small nose and said to Soren, "It's a bit like the Temple of Elements, but it's almost destroyed. It's rare to see an elemental temple in the material plane." The elemental temple. Naturally, it was a temple that believed in the four main elemental gods. This kind of temple was very rare in the entire material plane. Even in the elemental plane there were not many of them. The four main elemental gods were the existence of great divine power. They were the oldest gods and had divine power far beyond other gods. Therefore their dependence on faith was also quite small. To some extent they didn't rely on faith at all. There were very few believers in the material plane. The main elemental gods didn't care much about the mortal world, so such temples were rare in any era. Is the evil god sealed here related to the elemental gods? Soren frowned and looked around, then began to look for the location of the elemental stones. He didn't know why there was no wind element here, but it was because of this that he felt more uneasy. The location of the elemental stones didn't change much. Soren quickly found the last elemental stone, wind, but before taking it out, Soren couldn't help but hesitate a little. Things had come to this point. No matter what he had to face, he couldn't give up, so Soren directly took it out. Rumble. The ground trembled violently. This somewhat familiar change made Soren highly vigilant. He said to the Lolita dragon next to him, "Be careful. Something powerful may appear later." As soon as his voice fell, the nearby airflow moved at high speed, and then the surrounding space was sealed. A huge figure appeared. It had a hazy body that looked half real and half illusory. It held a mysterious scimitar in its hand that was engraved with countless runes. Around its body was a rapidly rotating airflow. Its eyes that were filled with divinity fell upon Soren. Jinn, demigod. True enough, there was also a demigod-level Jinn here. Mortal. A voice that reached the heart sounded in Soren's mind. The demigod Jinn glanced at the elemental stone in Soren's hand and slowly said, "Did you take away the sealing stone?" The invisible gaze of divinity seemed to penetrate everything. The demigod Jinn frowned and stared at Soren. "I didn't expect the other sealed crystals to be in your hands. Do you know the consequences of doing that?" Consequences? Soren only knew that this was a chain quest, and the final reward was a Tier 3 legendary elemental stone and a shard of divinity from a certain evil god. The demigod Jinn sighed and slowly said, "Mortals are really ignorant and fearless. The elemental stone in your hand is a seal. Sealed in it is the evil god of the abyss that was killed in the first war between demons and elements. After unlocking the seal, you may be able to get some of his power, but it will also lead you to fall into the realm of the abyss." Mortal. Is it worth falling into the abyss for a little power? Elemental war. Soren seemed to think of something, and some memories appeared in his mind instantly. Of course, the information in his memory was not quite comprehensive, but he still knew the general story. The bottomless abyss once had a very strong period. Many lords of the abyss, under the command of the demon monarch, unexpectedly ended a long civil war and decided to lead the demon army to the multiverse. At that time, they naively thought that they could unify the whole universe. Unfortunately, they were defeated in just the first battle. The demon army encountered the elemental legion, and their behavior angered the oldest wind elemental god. The main god of the wind elemental system woke up countless sleeping demigod jinns, and then beat the demon army back to the bottomless abyss. This was the only recorded battle record of the four elemental gods. In the long history of the multiverse, there seemed to be no other records that clearly recorded the four elemental gods fighting. No matter how the times changed, the elemental gods seemed to have always been indifferent. Or they didn't care about these things at all. Even in the upcoming Avatar crisis, the four elemental gods were the least affected, because they didn't need any power of faith at all, and they didn't rely too much on the field of clergy. They themselves were one of the most powerful gods. Elements were the support of the whole world. No matter how the world changed, earth, water, wind, and fire would always exist. Even the battles between the gods rarely affected them. There was a passage that recorded the wind elemental god, Arcady. Arcady is one of the 4 elemental gods. She seems to be above time and has not changed in the long history. She has a little contact with other gods related to the wind elemental, such as Airdryphenia, guardian goddess of the winged elves, and Shandakal, god of travel and exploration, but their relationship is not very close. The wind elemental goddess seems to have always been indifferent to everything. Occasionally she will respond to the prayers of her believers when she is bored. But in fact, this is just a pastime for her when she is bored, because she doesn't need believers to provide her with power. The only battle record of this goddess was when she led the wind elemental army to drive the demon army back to the bottomless abyss in the very ancient era. Since then she seems to have been wandering in the long river of time. In the face of the demigod Jin's questioning, the figure of Vivian appeared in Soren's mind. His expression unexpectedly became very calm, and his eyes met the eyes of the demigod Jin, and he slowly said, "It's worth it. Maybe that's where I should go. I don't believe in fate, but I know that I am destined to go to the bottomless abyss." There was no way out. If he wanted to completely eliminate the hidden dangers of Vivian, then Soren was destined to go to the bottomless abyss. Only by entering the bottomless abyss could he truly eliminate the remaining divinity of the Dread Lord. Otherwise it would always be a ticking time bomb. Soren absolutely did not want to see Vivian's body torn apart one day, and finally, a resurrected Dread Lord would walk out of her corpse. The god of tyranny was resurrected in this way. His descendants didn't react until the moment of their death. Their souls, divinity, and power were all swallowed by the god of tyranny. The only body left was also turned into the last prop for his resurrection. This was something that Soren absolutely could not see. For Vivian he could even give up his own life. What was the point of falling into the bottomless abyss? The demigod Jin was silent. Soren's determined eyes seemed to contain some kind of power, and this strong belief made it silent. Finally the demigod Jin slowly said, "Mortal. Since you have made your decision, then get ready for the final challenge. I hope that the bottomless abyss will not make your soul completely lost." The brilliance of divinity emerged. The 4 elemental stones on Soren's body emerged at the same time, and then turned into a mysterious light gate. Elder Wind Elemental, legendary creature. Elder Earth Elemental, legendary creature. Elder Fire Elemental, legendary creature. Elder Water Elemental, legendary creature. The 4 elemental stones gradually disappeared with the energy. When the portal connecting the elemental plane was completely completed, the figures of the 4 elemental elders also appeared in Soren's sight. They were second only to the elemental Jin and had legendary combat power. Chapter 431. 25 kilometers away. The barbarian who was moving forward suddenly stopped and looked at his companion who seemed to be in a daze. He said in a deep voice, "Die? What's going on? Did you find something?" The masked woman closed her eyes as if she was sensing something. Psionic warlocks used a kind of energy similar to the power of the will. They were one of the few professions that were born with the telepathy ability. After a while, the masked woman opened her eyes and looked at Soren's direction. She frowned slightly and said slowly, "Nothing. It seems that someone summoned a demigod, but it shouldn't affect our plan." Demigod was the most common divine creature. Many legendary wizards could summon them. There were many demigod in the elemental plane. According to the ancient contract, they would respond to the summoning of many spellcasters. The more famous Limited Wish and Wish were to summon an elemental Jin. Wind elementals were the most likely to respond to such spells. Note, most of the time Wish summons a wind Jin. The barbarian nodded slowly and said, "That's good." The two of them continued to walk forward. Soon, a very open area appeared in front of them. Unlike other places, the plants here were very lush. There were many natural stalactites around, and they could faintly hear the sound of underground spring water. When the two figures appeared in this open area, some large monsters also appeared. It was a group of hook horrors that occupied this area. For the two in front of them, the hook horrors were not even a threat. So, in just a blink of an eye, there were more than a few corpses on the ground. "This is the place." The masked woman stopped in the middle and said slowly, "This is the best place calculated by Thaling number 5. We will ambush the Queen of Spiders here." The barbarian looked around and said, "Understood." Immediately he took out some strange silver-white metal and left a special mark in a hidden corner. This was the rune of a spell. Under normal circumstances, the barbarian who had more muscles than brains would not be able to grasp it. The fact that the barbarian in front of her could do this meant that he might have a part-time job, or he might have good knowledge. No matter what, it meant that this barbarian was quite dangerous. Hey, Soren. Lolita moved her feet and came behind Soren. The two of them stood back to back, surrounded by the 4 summoned elemental elders. The little Loli's expression was a little worried, but there was also a trace of excitement in her eyes. She whispered, "Didn't you say that we just need to fight the small monsters? How could he summon such a powerful thing all of a sudden? 4 legendary elemental life forms. Even a powerful giant dragon would feel the same pressure, especially when the terrain of the Underdark made it difficult for her to use her full strength. Even if she could not defeat him, she could not transform into a giant dragon and fly away from the battle. It was just an accident." Soren's expression was quite serious. He looked at the demigod Jin in front of him. After making sure that the other party didn't intend to do it himself, he couldn't help but calm down a little. If the demigod Jin also joined the battle, then their chances of winning would be very low. However, facing 4 legendary elemental life forms at the same time, Soren also felt a lot of pressure in his heart. Back then, the other adventurers completed this mission by piling up human lives, crippling a total of 5 groups. Now, although Soren was stronger, his chances of winning alone were not very high. The only advantage he had was that he had coaxed a giant dragon to help him. Although he didn't know the specific strength of the little lowly dragon, she should be able to share a lot of the pressure. The little lowly's face seemed to be a little eager to try. The current situation made her feel like she was the protagonist of a legendary story. The great brass dragon princess and her little followers triggered a legendary seal, and then 4 powerful elemental elders appeared. Finally, after a difficult battle, Her Royal Highness and her little followers won the battle. Yes. That's how the story should be. The little lowly's mind was in a mess, but her battle intuition was very sharp. She whispered, "You deal with the Earth Elemental Elder and the Fire Elemental Elder. Leave the other 2 to me." The talent of a giant dragon was very amazing. With just a glance, the little lowly judged the best battle allocation. Soren had very high dexterity, so it was easier to deal with the Earth Elemental Elder. At the same time, the legendary curved sword in his hand was not ordinary at all. It exuded a cold aura, and it was twice the result with half the effort to deal with the Fire Elemental Elder. As for the other 2 elemental elders, especially the Wind Elemental Elder, which was the most difficult to deal with, naturally, it would be left to the story's protagonist, the great brass dragon princess, to deal with it. Right? Soren hesitated a little when he heard this and then whispered, "Understood. Be careful." Boom. As the portal connecting to the elemental plane gradually disappeared, the 4 elemental elders also launched their attacks at the same time. The first to attack was the slowest Earth Elemental Elder. It waved its huge fist and directly smashed the ground in front of it. With a loud bang, a sharp stone pillar pierced out of the ground, and then instantly separated Soren and the little lowly dragon who were standing back to back. Not good. The wisdom of these elemental elders was not low. Elementals were not the same as other life forms. Many low-level elementals may not even have their own consciousness. However, the elemental elders in front of them were obviously different. As soon as the battle broke out, they cut off the battle formation of Soren and the little lowly dragon, directly separating them so that they could not support each other at any time. The second to attack was the Wind Elemental Elder. With the whistling wind sweeping past, the figure of the Wind Elemental Elder rushed directly over. "Soren, the other 2 are yours." There was a faint light in the little lowly dragon's eyes. Her petite body flew up directly, and she raised her hand and pointed at the Elder Water Elemental in front of her. "Maze?" A distorted space appeared. The figure of the Elder Water Elemental disappeared in an instant, and it had been sent into a different dimension maze. At this time, the little lowly dragon turned her eyes to the Wind Elemental in front of her. The 4 elemental planes of earth, water, wind, and fire seemed to be similar, but in fact, the strongest combat power had always been considered to be the Wind Elemental plane because they had defeated powerful abyss demons. From the perspective of combat power, the Wind Elemental was quite amazing both in terms of speed and lethality. What was even more frightening was that the Wind Elemental Elder generally had very powerful lightning-type spells. The Lord of Storms. He was a powerful god in the material plane, and also a terrifying existence that could control lightning and storms. The wind elemental realm could easily extend the power of lightning. Crackling lightning appeared. There was a jumping electric current in the body of the wind elemental lord, accompanied by the whistling wind. A jumping lightning swept out directly. It turned out that the little Loli's judgment was correct. With her magic resistance, she had a more obvious advantage against lightning attacks. Soren, on the other hand, was in a very passive situation when he was being electrocuted. Evade sight. Shadow leap. Facing the 3 elemental elders who surrounded him, Soren's figure disappeared in an instant. Bad guy. The little lowly dragon's petite body suddenly stiffened, and she could not help but feel a little nervous because Soren was a legendary rogue. If he wanted to sneak away, these elemental elders would not be able to stop him. But if she stayed here, it would be a tragedy. Being besieged by 3 elemental elders at the same time was not a joke. Just at the moment when Soren's figure disappeared, the pressure she was under suddenly increased. She could not help but bite her pink lips and murmured, "I hope this guy won't leave me behind and run away." Flame, earth, wind. Although she temporarily trapped the water elemental elder with maze, when facing 3 legendary powers at the same time, the little lowly's forehead could not help but sweat. "Why don't you do it?" The little lowly dragon bit her lip with her white teeth and took a step back. She murmured, "How can I fight this bastard? I'm a girl. He actually used me as a meat shield. Shameless. Dirty." Chapter 432. From a tactical point of view. Soren's behavior was obviously correct, because in his view, although the Lolita dragon next to him looked like a little girl, her body was still a powerful dragon after all. As everyone knew, dragons had always been very resistant to beatings. So after Soren's figure disappeared, he began to look for a suitable entry point for the battle. The best entry point was naturally when the 3 elemental elders attacked the Lolita dragon at the same time. However, he obviously forgot to consider the feelings of the little lowly. In the lowly dragon's heart, she had already cursed Soren 10,000 times. She even cursed Soren with the words F***ck your mother. The 3 elemental elders put a lot of pressure on her. No matter how strong the dragon's talent was, she was still a dragon who had just reached adulthood. Moreover, the battle of the legendary level formed a suppression of numbers, so no matter how strong her strength was, it would be reduced. Rumble. It was only the first round of attacks, but the little Lolita's situation was not very good. Flames, lightning, rocks. The 3 elemental elders directly blocked her ability to fight back, and directly covered her with a powerful firepower net, forcing her to use blink to escape. Soren. The little lowly's face was covered in dirt as she retreated at high speed. Her cute little face had a look of gnashing her teeth, and even a little bit of a sob could be heard. Of course, she would never admit this even if she was beaten to death. The first round of attacks finally ended. Even if the little Lolita had an instantaneous teleportation spell, she still suffered a few hits. But at this time, Soren's figure also appeared from the distorted shadows. The legendary curved sword Icing Death emitted a strange silver-white streamer, and the temperature of the blade had dropped below 0. With a flash of cold light, Soren instantly cut into the battlefield and slashed at the fire elemental elder in front of him. With the experience of dealing with the Baylor last time, the fire elemental elder should be the easiest enemy for him to deal with. Scorching flames raged out. But for Soren, who had the curved sword Icing Death, these flames were no threat at all. It was also a legendary creature, but the combat power of the elder fire elemental was much lower than that of the Baylor. These scorching flames were instantly extinguished by the curved sword Icing Death. At the same time, the cold characteristics directly caused great damage to the elder fire elemental. With just one slash, Soren had heavily injured the elder fire elemental. The dark energy of Shadow Strike combined with the cold energy of the legendary curved sword Icing Death caused hundreds of damage to the elder fire elemental in an instant. Sword form, spinning strike. Soren knew that the outcome of a legendary level battle could be decided in an instant. Therefore, he did not hesitate to follow up with another attack even though the elder fire elemental was heavily injured. Risking being hit by the elder earth elemental, Soren once again swung his sword at the enemy in front of him. Bang! Soren's body was sent flying, and he spat out a mouthful of blood in midair. The terrible force made his sternum cave in, and he even hit the wall behind him directly, leaving a faint trace. However, Soren's result at the cost of being hit head-on was also quite brilliant. The Elder Fire Elemental was only able to withstand less than one round of attacks from Soren, and it was already in a state of near death. The legendary curved sword Icing Death had an unexpectedly powerful lethality against it. Good chance. Facing the Elder Fire Elemental who was in a state of near death, the Lolita Dragon instantly launched Disintegrate. With a green light flying out, the Elder Fire Elemental, whose vitality was already very weak, was completely disintegrated in an instant. One was killed. Soren coughed and stood up, swallowing back the blood in his throat. The Earth Elemental had a natural strength advantage. After advancing into the legendary realm, its strength adjustment value was very high. Just now, it actually hurt him badly. However, since an Elder Fire Elemental had been killed, the next battle would be much easier. Before the Elder Water Elemental came out of the maze, they temporarily gained a one-on-one advantage, and the pressure on both of them was reduced too much. Evade sight. Soren did not hesitate to enter stealth again. For him who had the anti-detection cloak, as long as he entered stealth, the Elder Fire Elemental in front of him would not be able to find him. Basically, he did not have to worry about being attacked by them. Out of battle again. The little Lolita Dragon had a hateful expression, but she could not do anything to Soren. After all, he was a rogue. Against such a legendary level monster, unless he transformed into his slaughter form, he would definitely suffer heavy injuries. The Lolita Dragon once again became the primary target of attack. Being used as a meat shield by Soren angered her to death. This was not her ideal battle scenario at all. Shouldn't her ideal battle be Soren standing in front of her, and then she would stand behind him elegantly and confidently, casting spells? Note, she thought that Soren would treat her as a spellcaster, but in fact, Soren treated her as a meat shield. This abominable guy did not follow the plot of the novel at all. Twisted Shadows. Soren's figure wandered around the edge of the battle circle, looking for a chance to break in and seriously injure the opponent. The high-speed Elder Wind Elemental was not in his consideration. Soren's target was the Elder Earth Elemental, who looked quite slow but had thick skin. Shadow Strike. Sword form, beheading. The cold light instantly cut through the air and directly cut towards the Elder Earth Elemental in front of him. Soren felt as if he had cut into a solid marble, and Icing Death's blade had already exhausted its strength just by sinking into it. But it didn't matter. Soren never expected physical attacks to easily defeat the Earth Elemental. So the moment he pulled out his curved sword, he also quickly raised his hand and pressed it on the back of the Elder Earth Elemental. Vampiric Touch, Divinity. A row of data appeared. Activated spell-like ability, Vampiric Touch, Divinity. The target's immunity resistance failed. Negative energy erodes the target's vitality. Vitality transferred to your own body. You've caused 60 points of energy damage to the target. You've recovered 60 points of vitality. A special life energy was transferred to Soren's body. This energy was as heavy as the earth. It did not have the vitality of life that he had felt before, but it had a heavy texture. Under the effect of this energy, Soren's injuries recovered rapidly, and his own state gradually recovered to a state of minor injury. P.S. The power was out during the day, so it could only be released at the same time. Chapter 433. Vampiric Touch. As long as the enemy had vitality, this spell would work, and the damage it caused was quite stable. The divine power gave it a strong spell penetration ability. So far, Soren had not failed to cast it. It was like a fixed damage ability for Soren, reducing the opponent's vitality and healing his own injuries. Unfortunately, it could only be used once a day, and Soren could only use it when he was in a desperate situation. As for the spell Vampiric Touch, because it was not a natural spell-like ability, and there was no divine power to support it, even if Soren remembered it, he had to cast it first and then touch the target before it could take effect. Note, casting time is about 1.5 seconds. In this case, it was not divinity that affected the spell, but the spell power brought by his wizard level. The injury recovered at an amazing speed. Soren caused hundreds of damage in an instant, but unfortunately, it was not fatal to the Elder Earth Elemental. However, this result was completely within Soren's expectations. At the moment when he pulled away, Soren's fingertips also flew out a piece of arcane missile. Perhaps this kind of attack had limited effect on dragons, but it was quite effective on other legendary creatures. After all, creatures like dragons that were born with all kinds of resistance and could increase their strength while sleeping were still rare. Arcane Missile X6. The arcane missile whistled out and hit the Elder Earth Elemental. Although the damage caused was greatly reduced, it still accumulated 70 to 80 points of damage. 30 arcane missiles were fired at once. Although each missile only dealt 2 points of damage, it could not take advantage of the advantage of quantity. In the beginning, the wizard's arcane explosion relied on a huge number of enemies. As long as the enemy was not completely immune to the damage of arcane missiles, then if 50 missiles were not enough, then 100 missiles would be used. All kinds of spell enhancement and spell maximization would be used to increase the spell level, and finally a torrential explosion would kill the enemy. Unfortunately, this tactic could be broken by a one-circle shield in advance. Otherwise, it would be a terrible burst of damage. Melf's Minute Meteor. Soren pulled away after a round of explosion, and at the same time he quickly retreated and cast his big move. However, what surprised him a little was that a message prompt suddenly appeared at this time. Breakthrough in ability. You've made new breakthroughs in battle after battle. You've received information about combat spell casting. You've mastered a new specialty, combat casting. Accident? Soren didn't expect this either. The combat casting ability actually had a breakthrough in this situation, but what surprised him even more was that when he completed the Melf's Minute Meteors, the second data display appeared again. Breakthrough in ability. You've grasped more experience and skills in battle. Your understanding of spell casting has reached a new height. You've obtained information about the ability, mobile casting. Mobile casting. It was an advanced ability for combat spell casting and a prerequisite for flight spell casting. It wasn't the first time that Soren had used this ability. However, it was only now that the new data had appeared. The appearance of 2 data prompts at one time made Soren's spirit shake. At his level of strength, every improvement was quite obvious. Being able to master 2 fairly important basic abilities through battle meant that he would have enough ability points to master more powerful legendary abilities in the future. Accumulation, precipitation, brewing. The battles over and over again were not without gains, but it took a relatively long time to trigger qualitative changes from quantitative changes. Rumble. After mastering the ability, combat casting, Soren's combat skills suddenly became much more flexible. The flames of the Minute Meteors roared out and enveloped the Elder Earth Elemental in it. With Soren's attack speed, the full-force explosion was completely a close-range bombardment attack. Even the figure of the Elder Earth Elemental was covered by dust. Why do I feel that this guy is getting more and more powerful? Lolita Dragon couldn't help but look at Soren, and a hint of surprise appeared in her eyes. She murmured, "This guy is really a freak." Dragon wing form. Little Lolita took a deep breath, and a pair of huge brass dragon wings instantly opened on her back. Her figure rose into the air and chased after the Elder Wind Elemental in front of her. Since Soren could suppress the Elder Earth Elemental, she must contain the most difficult Elder Wind Elemental. Blasphemy Pain. As soon as the bombardment of Melf's Minute Meteors ended, Soren launched the ability, Blasphemy, that he had recently mastered. This was a spell-like ability that was effective against any enemy, a power that directly acted on the soul and spirit. A power that came from the realm of the gods. The great pain directly acted on the spirit of the Elder Earth Elemental, which made it tremble all over. Shadow Jump. Soren's figure disappeared into the darkness, and the surrounding space began to distort. A gray color covered everything. His figure shuttled through the shadow plane, and the cold light directly penetrated the body of the Elder Earth Elemental. Bang! The heavy body fell to the ground. A row of data appeared in front of Soren's eyes. Killed Elder Earth Elemental. Extracting target's soul energy. You've gained 48,000 slaughter EXP. The Elder Earth Elemental died. The difficulty of the battle was reduced a lot. Soren took a little breath and began to target the most difficult Elder Wind Elemental. However, it seemed that he didn't need to do anything. Little Lolita had no problem fighting an Elder Earth Elemental alone. In that case, Soren was calm. He went back into the shadows and began to look for the last chance to finish off the Elder Earth Elemental. There was never enough slaughter EXP. It was easier to find opportunities to cut in outside the battle. An Elder Earth Elemental had close to 50,000 slaughter EXP, which was a big source of income for Soren. If it was up to him to kill these 4 elders earth elemental alone, it would probably be enough to raise a wizard level. Unfortunately, it was not a wise choice to fight alone. He had no confidence at all if he didn't transform into slaughter form. Even if he transformed, he only had a 50 to 60% chance. The battle was still going on. As soon as little Lolita saw Soren's figure disappear again, she was furious. In this case, he didn't hurry over to help. He didn't even know where to go. She really wanted to bite him to death. Dragon's breath. Facing the Elder Wind Elemental who moved at high speed, little Lolita couldn't help but take a deep breath. Her small chest became bulging, and then a scorching flame swept out. The dragon's breath attack was very lethal. At the same time, at the moment when the dragon's breath was over, Soren's figure also reappeared. With a cold light, the Elder Wind Elemental ended in his hands. The 3 Elders Earth Elemental were dead. The last Elder Water Elemental was not challenging at all. The effect of maze seemed to still be there, and the Elder Water Elemental had not appeared yet. Little Lolita waved her hand gently. It seemed to be some kind of special spell, and then the figure of the Elder Water Elemental appeared. Umph. Little Lolita glared at Soren angrily and stood aside with her arms crossed. It seemed that she had no intention of helping at all. This guy is too shameless. I'll just let him deal with the last Elder Water Elemental by himself. I'm so angry. There was almost no difficulty in fighting an Elder Water Elemental alone. Soren's next battle was very easy. But as the battle ended, little Lolita finally made a move. She bit Soren. The little Loli, who had been holding her breath for a long time, finally took a bite on Soren's arm after defeating all the enemies, leaving a row of clear and neat teeth marks. Then she lifted her leg and kicked twice as if to vent her anger. Finally, she glared at Soren hatefully as if she wanted to take another bite. This bastard. I'm so cute and beautiful. He actually used me as a meat shield. On an open flat ground. The monk sat cross-legged on a towering stone pillar. He seemed to be resting with his eyes closed, but his spirit was always paying attention to the surrounding environment. At this moment, he suddenly opened his eyes, and a threatening light flashed in his eyes. The voice of the rogue sounded in his mind. The target has appeared. The target has appeared. The bait has entered the predetermined range. The prey has appeared. Everyone get ready for battle. A fierce aura instantly shrouded the surroundings. The monk stood up at once. He looked a little nervous. He couldn't help but take a deep breath and said, "The monk is on standby, ready to enter the battle at any time." A cold voice with a metallic taste sounded slowly, "The clock is ready. Everyone get ready for battle. The prey has appeared. The monk is on standby. After the battle begins, immediately clear the targets near the prey." A series of voices sounded in his mind. Sword Saint is on standby. Rogue is on standby. Barbarian is on standby. Thaling number 3 is ready. Thaling number 2 has taken over the command of the Arcane Tower. Thaling number 1 has completed the calculation of the half-plane confinement. After the prey has appeared, the half-plane confinement will be activated. Along with the voices, a female voice sounded. Finally, a magnetic female voice rang out. Synchronized telepathic connection established. Psionic energy field sensing sharing. Tactical simulation officially activated. All units get ready for battle at any time. Psionic transmission has completed synchronization. P.S. I'll continue to write, but I won't be able to finish it. I'll finish the combat chapters in one go tomorrow. Chapter 434. It was a piece of translucent diamond-shaped crystal. Soren's hand that was holding it could not help but tremble slightly. Accompanied by a faint aura, this strange crystal gradually disappeared from his palm like ice and snow gradually melting. An indescribable power surged into his body, and Soren's skin suddenly seemed to have a faint fluorescence. This scene only lasted for a moment, and then his whole person was no different from before. If there was a difference, it was that his eyes seemed to have an indescribable magic, and anyone who looked at his eyes could not help but feel a trace of awe. The Shard of Divinity. There were very few records about it in the material plane because in the long history, there were not many gods that fell in the mortal world. Unless there was a situation like the Avatar crisis, even if the gods were killed, the power would be obtained by the victor. The only record of the Shard of Divinity in the mortal world was Tears of Baal. a special shard of divinity condensed by the son of God of Massacre. It not only contained the power of the God of Massacre, but also the divinity of the God of Massacre. Tears of Baal only appeared for a short time in history. Since then, there were basically no other records related to the shard of divinity. A row of data appeared in front of his eyes, absorbing the shard of divinity. Divine power conversion. Fusing with the shard of divinity. Unknown residual consciousness found. Force test of will triggered. Test of will passed. Unknown residual consciousness completely wiped out. Successfully absorbed the shard of divinity. You have gained 3 shard of divinity. Insufficient shard of divinity. You have no divine position. Unable to convert divine power. The minimum requirement for converting divine power is minor shard of divinity. Divine power activated. Shard of divinity activated. Divinity domain mutation triggered. You begin to transform into a demigod form. You are constructing your own laws. You are constructing your own domain. You have gained a new characteristic, demigod. You are immune to the legendary spell, time stop. Dense amounts of data appeared. A large amount of data appeared in front of Soren's eyes. Just like when he first woke up, he even felt a little dizzy. Somehow he seemed to have sensed a change. This change did not just come from his body, but was also related to these data streams. The power of divinity seemed to have seeped into it, and it was undergoing some kind of slow change that he could not understand. This change couldn't be described with words, but Soren could feel it and realize how shocking it was. This reminded him of the first adventurer who ascended to godhood. Gods. Their existence wasn't that simple. As high and mighty gods, although they had great power, they also had many things to do. One of the things that occupied most of their time was to answer the prayers of all the believers, and then to bestow divine spells upon the priests. There was a theory. The brain domain of gods was far beyond the imagination of mortals. Sometimes they were like a super biological brain, constantly receiving and responding to the prayers of the believers, and at the same time transforming the power of faith into divine power to bestow divine spells upon the priests. This was quite a complicated process, so some gods gave up their clergy, and even like the 4 main elemental gods, they didn't develop many believers at all. Under normal circumstances, unless the gods had fallen, they needed to respond to the prayers of all the priests who believed in them every day, and transform the power of faith to bestow divine spells upon them. There was an adventurer who ascended to godhood. He had gained great power, but he also encountered a problem. The adventurer had to adapt to the prayers of the believers, and then slowly respond to the divine spells they bestowed upon him. This process took him a long time to adjust. Therefore, in addition to the original hero template with a total natural attribute of more than 90 points, there was also a divine template that was obtained after ascending to godhood. The existence of the divine template was to deal with the prayers of the believers. Soren had a special feeling, that was, the flow of data in his body seemed to be changing in this direction under the power of divinity and divinity. The jumping data in front of him seemed to be filled with some kind of power, and it made him feel a slight electric current in his brain. He still couldn't describe it in words, but he knew that some changes were going on. At this time, Soren's data was very different from the past. Name: Soren, demigod, race, half-elf, son of slaughter, attributes, strength 19 plus 7, giant strength plus 6, dexterity 27 plus 2, constitution 22 plus 1, intelligence 22 plus 2, wisdom 16 plus 1, charm 19 plus 3, most sorrow plus 2, alignment, lawful evil profession, level 10 commoner, level 7 thief, 0306500, level 8 shadow dancer, 0375000, level 10 wizard, 0148500, grade 5, health points, 272345, sturdy, experience points, 135075, slaughter exp, 1545, profession exp, unassigned skill points, none attribute points, none legend level, 42 divinity points, 16, minor divinity, requires 30 points to upgrade, minor divinity. Divinity points, 3, requires 10 points to upgrade, minor divinity. Status: normal basic skills, sneak 285, literacy 280, steal 85, pick lock 9, trap 85, focus 75, negotiate 105, appraise 65, deceive 60, intimidation 145, taunt 30, act 35, listen 55, dodge 145, parry 75, block 60, heal 85, search 55, detect 70, copy scroll 50, spell identification 45, survival 80, use magic device 55, cooking 40, alchemy 30. Legendary skills. Omnipotent hands, legendary evasion, legendary battle skills, epic dexterity special abilities, blessing of the misfortune goddess, blessing of the ocean goddess, dragon blood baptism LV2, heart of slaughter, slayer, death walker, ascetic, erudite, blasphemy, once per day, personal abilities, nimble left hand, eidetic memory, perseverance, encyclopedic knowledge, skilled spellcasting, reflex evasion, intuitive evasion, roll evasion, agile movement, evade sight, dark vision, combat. Spell casting, spell control, empower spell, maximize spell, minor spell resistance, minor cold resistance, medium fire resistance, minor poison resistance, minor electric resistance, greater dual wielding, sturdy, regeneration, intermediate, telepathy 10 feet. Profession abilities, shadow control, nimble mind, military weapon, proficiency, curved sword, legendary. Combat skills, summon shadow, shadow jump, 200 m, shadow strike, shadow jump, 2 times, fear gaze, divine, fear, divine, vampiric touch, divine, counterspell, sword form, heavy hack, sword form, horizontal slash, sword form, behead, sword form, waist chop, sword form, spinning strike. In a dark passage, a wretched figure was running for his life. His whole body seemed to be shrouded in shadows, and his appearance could not be seen clearly. Target has appeared. The prey is being attracted to the designated area. Everyone get ready for battle. The Queen of Spiders, Rose, has been spotted. The prey has been exposed. Psionic warlocks, get ready to mark the target. 10 kilometers away from the designated location. Other saints have been spotted approaching. The target is the god of vampires. Seems to be attracted by the bait as well. Recalculating the battle plan. Do you want to intercept the target? The god of vampires is closing the distance at high speed. The current distance is 8 kilometers. A series of telepathic communications echoed. Accompanied by a cold thawing voice, a metallic male voice sounded in the minds of the god slayers, saying slowly, "Cancel the interception plan. Let them and the bait leave. Our target is the Queen of Spiders. Wait for the prey to appear in the designated area." In an instant, Soren's body seemed to have been hit by an electric current. Just as he completed the fusion of the shard of divinity, he also seemed to have sensed that something was gradually approaching him. This was a feeling that belonged to the realm of the gods. Chapter 435. Soren's figure moved forward in the shadows. Behind him was the Lolita dragon, who was carefully lurking while casting greater invisibility. Although he knew that such a move was very dangerous, Soren still couldn't resist the curiosity in his heart and was ready to come over and check it out. This was the first special feeling he had after becoming a demigod. Although he had just advanced into the realm of demigod, did not master the special ability of damage immunity, and did not advance into the form of a saint, Soren had reached the realm of demigod after all. Although there was not much change in the data display, the hidden immunity of a demigod was still there. In fact, his actual combat power had increased by at least 30% because from now on, the probability of low-grade spells working on him was very low. In addition, there was the Cloak of Proof Against Detection, which was almost a divine artifact for rogues. In case of any special situation, Soren could easily escape the battle. In this regard, the Cloak of Proof Against Detection was tested by the Goddess of Magic, who was a greater divine power. Even the Goddess of Magic could not see the person wearing this equipment without using some special means. As for the Lolita dragon following behind, Soren really couldn't do anything about her. Logically speaking, it was best if she didn't follow him. This way Soren could stay and leave alone if he wanted to. But he couldn't resist the Lolita dragon's princess temper. If she insisted on following, Soren couldn't do anything about it. Moreover, she was more or less a legendary combat power. If the target of the sense was really the god of half-elves and rogues in Soren's memory, then she might really be able to help Soren a lot. As the two gradually moved forward, the vision ahead gradually widened, and the underground passage became an empty flat ground. There was a forest of stone pillars in front of them, and they couldn't see any further. Soren didn't dare to get too close. Just as Soren was about to tiptoe over to see the situation, a magnetic and flirtatious female voice sounded in his mind and slowly said, "So it's you, little guy. Stay where you are and don't move. This level of battle is not something you can get involved in. Be careful not to lose your life." He stiffened. Soren's body instantly froze on the spot. There was no one around him and no one could get close to him without him noticing. The voice was directly transmitted into his mind. Psionic Warlock. Soren immediately recalled the psionic force field he had sensed earlier. His instincts told him that this was a psionic warlock with a profession level of at least 30. This kind of existence was definitely something he could easily deal with. In fact, there was no such existence in the entire material plane. Psionic warlocks of this level could only be found in the astral plane. It was as if the entire space was shaking. Just as Soren took a cautious step back, he saw the stone pillars in front of him collapse. Then, in the dust about 300 meters away, a group of drows appeared in Soren's sight. Not good. With just a glance, Soren, who was very familiar with the Underdark, knew that this was a standard guard of the drows. Drow Ranger, Drow Warrior, Spider Elf, Lolth Priest. What is she going to do? Many thoughts flashed through Soren's mind, but he still couldn't figure it out. He thought to himself, is she going to kill this drows? His thoughts were still not clear. The next moment, the change had already exceeded Soren's expectations. A special figure appeared in midair. No one knew when he appeared. All that could be seen was his silver-white metallic arm and his lifelike face made of metal. There was a clock-like device in front of his chest. When the strange metal man pressed his hand on his chest, the clock on it stopped immediately. Time froze at this moment. Something unimaginable to Soren happened. Some kind of unpredictable power spread out, and then everything nearby stopped in an instant. Including Soren, who was already a demigod. A row of data appeared, affected by the effect of clockwork nirvana. Demigod domain has failed. Time has stopped. Duration, 1 second. Clockwork nirvana. Clockwork nirvana's mechanical mirror. This information made Soren's heart tremble as if he had thought of something. However, what happened in the next moment left him with no time to think so much. Clockwork nirvana has been activated. Battle begins. Thaling number 1 has activated demi-plane imprisonment. All units get ready for battle. I don't have much time left. The silver-white figure floated in midair. As the clock on his chest stopped, the arcane light on his body gradually dimmed, as if he had lost some kind of powerful magic. Telepathy had been established. Synchronized telepathy had been transmitted to the minds of all the combat units nearby. A cold mechanical voice sounded. Thaling number 1 has taken over the control of the demi-plane. Activating demi-plane imprisonment. Synchronizing the material plane space. Activating spatial fold. Synchronizing the space of different dimensions. Demi-plane energy transmission. Locked onto the target space within 15 meters. Spider Queen, Lolth, has been discovered. Demi-plane imprisonment has been established. Warning. Warning. Unknown power has been activated. Target has activated celestial domain. Demi-plane energy is rapidly consumed. Current energy consumption is 1%. 2%. 3%. The time was synchronized within 1 second. The metal man's voice sounded almost at the same time, and he said slowly, demi-plane imprisonment has been established. We have less than 100 seconds left. Everyone get ready to fight at any time. The time was synchronized 1 second later. 25 kilometers away from the battlefield, the figure of the monk stood up. Thaling number 2 has taken over the teleportation authority of different dimensions. Space waymark locked. Psionic node locked. Extracting the energy of different dimensions. Activating dimensional portal number 1. Coordinates X87Y157. A dimensional portal opened. It was less than 3 meters away from the monk. His figure instantly bowed and leaped into the dimensional portal. The next moment he appeared in Soren's field of vision, just above the drow guards. Lunar shade style. The figure of the monk turned into a shadow and swooped down directly from the air. Sunflame style. As the golden palms slammed together, scorching flames and surging heat waves raged out. The huge impact swept everything within 30 meters and directly scattered the drow guards. However, among the figures that were sent flying, there was a strange figure that was frozen on the spot. The space around her body was distorted, as if it was imprisoning her on the spot. Shadowless kick. Whirlwind kick. Gale palm. Out of sight. The storm-like attacks raged out, but the target was not the figure imprisoned in place, but the other drows nearby. In an instant, with the figure imprisoned in place as the center, there was no one else within 20 meters. Pada. The figure of the monk landed and stood in place as if he was meditating. Bursting out so many killing moves in just 1 or 2 seconds, even the incarnation of a god would be a huge burden. The monk has completed the mission. The target's surroundings have been cleared. Barbarians prepare to relay. A cold voice sounded again, space waymark locked. Psionic node locked. Extracting the energy of another dimension. Opening the second dimensional portal. Coordinates X57Y127. The second dimensional portal is open. Launching, magic-powered armor Type 3. Unknown space. In this huge half-bit wall, there was a towering arcane tower. With the voice of Thaling number 2, 2 huge magic-powered armors disappeared from the 5th floor of the arcane tower, and then appeared on the battlefield and quickly dispersed to the left and right positions. However, they did not join the battle but were in a defensive posture. Space waymark locked. Psionic node locked. Extracting the energy of another dimension. Opening the third dimensional portal. Coordinates X37Y107. 30 kilometers away in a straight line. A portal from another dimension appeared in front of the barbarian. The barbarian, who had been on standby, let out a wild roar. Then his whole body emitted a crackling sound. His burly body suddenly became like a giant. His muscles were full of explosive power. It was so shocking. Epic rage. The barbarian's figure passed through the dimensional portal, holding a huge battle axe in both hands, and then roared and smashed it to the ground. Earth-splitting cut. The terrible power broke out and the ground around was completely shattered. With the figure imprisoned in the half-bit wall as the center, the 20-meter area around it completely collapsed. A cold metallic voice sounded, "Target is in a state of levitation. Target activated divine energy field. Calculating the consumption of divine energy field. Current attack consumption is 3%. It is estimated that the target's divine energy field can be broken after 33 attacks of the same strength. Target's divine energy field shield is too strong. Activating the backup plan. Thaling number 4 took over the command of the battle. Activating the cross-dimensional space tactical strike plan. Unknown half-bit wall. At the top of the arcane tower, a half-illusory figure appeared and said coldly, "Thaling number 4 took over the command of the battle. Activating the cross-dimensional space strike tactic. Synchronizing the calculation of the dimensional portal. Activating the dimensional portal. Super Arcane Crystal Pulse Cannon Type 4 began to charge. Current charging progress is 10%, 20%, 30%. Cross-dimensional space coordinate locked. Portal stabilized. Super Arcane Crystal Pulse Cannon Type 4 completed charging. Locking the target's spatial position. Initiating the cross-dimensional tactical strike. PS, stocks exploded and my vitality was greatly damaged. I also got a little heat stroke. I don't know how I'm writing in this state. 2 updates today. Chapter 436. It's her. When the other obstacles on the battlefield were cleared, Soren finally saw the appearance of the imprisoned drow. Almost instantly, Soren's body trembled involuntarily, and then there was a hint of fear in his eyes. There were not many existences in the entire multiverse that could make him feel fear, and there seemed to be only one existence in the Underdark that could make Soren feel fear. That was the Queen of Spiders, Lolth, the absolute ruler of the Underdark, the supreme ruler of the Infernal Plane. The former Queen of the Elves, the current Queen of Spiders. In terms of appearance, the Queen of Spiders should be a very, very beautiful woman. No matter how the outside world vilified her, saying that she looked like a big spider, one thing that could not be changed was that the Queen of Spiders was the Queen of the Elves. As the first wife of the Elves' main god, she was almost more beautiful than most of the goddesses in terms of appearance. Therefore, everyone who saw the Queen of Spiders for the first time would be shocked by her beautiful appearance. Even in the form of a drow, her charm could not be hidden. She was one of the 2 most beautiful women in the Abyss. She was also one of the 2 most terrifying women in the Abyss. The other was the Queen of Succubus, who was also a terrible existence that Soren was extremely afraid of. Ever since the Queen of Spiders had descended the Holy Kingdom, demon prison, into the bottomless abyss, the two terrifying goddesses had never stopped fighting. The Queen of Spiders was undoubtedly a goddess full of ambition. Her cruelty, insidiousness, and viciousness were enough to make everyone afraid. The Queen of Succubus was even more so. From a peerless plaything that the demon lords fought over, she became an important fallen demon in the abyss. She had schemed to kill 2 generations of demon princes, and she was definitely a nightmare in the hearts of many demon lords. Soren's fear of them was not only based on their strength, but also because of their cruelty and insidiousness. The Queen of Spiders was a goddess who loved to plot. They wanted to kill the Queen of Spiders. Soren didn't even need to think about it. Today's battle was bound to be a failure. The Queen of Spiders could not be killed. Her final defeat was only because she stood against the majority of the gods. Moreover, the Avatar crisis had not yet begun. Even if the Queen of Spiders' body came to the material plane, the connection with her god's kingdom, Abyss Demon Prison, was still there. How could a deity that could mobilize the terrifying power of the divine kingdom be easily killed by others? Go! The effect of clockwork nirvana only lasted for a second. Soren pulled the Lolita dragon next to him and frantically retreated to the back. This kind of assassination would only enrage the Queen of Spiders. Once the Queen of Spiders was enraged, they might be implicated if they continued to stay. The Super Arcane Crystal Pulse Cannon Type 4 is fully charged. Lock onto the coordinates of the dimensional space. Launch countdown 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Unknown half-plane. A terrifying energy gathered at the top of the arcane tower and finally turned into a purple light that flew out. The trajectory of the Super Arcane Crystal Pulse Cannon, Type 4, pierced through the air. Within the range of its trajectory was an open door to a different dimension. The purple energy beam passed through the dimension and appeared on the battlefield of the Underdark the next moment. Then a solid divine force field appeared around the Queen of Spiders' body. The energy light of the Super Arcane Crystal Pulse Cannon Type 4 collided violently with the divine force field on the Queen of Spiders' body. The terrible power made the whole space begin to tremble, and everything around seemed to be twisted and folded. Thaling Type 4 calculating the consumption of the target's divine force field. The energy consumption of the Super Arcane Crystal Pulse Cannon Type 4 is 90%, 80%, 70%. The remaining power of the target's divine force field is 70%, 60%, 50%. Attention! The target's divine force field is reduced to 30%. It is expected to disappear in 3 seconds. Blademaster, prepare for battle. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The divine force field activated by the Queen of Spiders gradually weakened, and at the same time the energy light of the Super Arcane Crystal Pulse Cannon Type 4 gradually dimmed. Just as the Queen of Spiders' divine force field shield completely disappeared, another portal opened in front of her. Thaling Type 5 taking over the portal authority. Calculating the space waymark. Opening the portal. Extracting the energy of the elemental pool. Elemental Fission Wave Blade, beginning to charge. The charging progress was Divine Artifact Level 1, Divine Artifact Level 2, Divine Artifact Level 3, Divine Artifact Level 4, Divine Artifact Level 5. The energy of the elemental pool is exhausted. Elemental Fission Wave Blade, charging complete. Time passed by minute by minute. The Blade Master was already on standby tens of kilometers away. He held a strange sword hilt in his hand. There were countless runes engraved on it, and it had a special silver-white texture. There was no blade on the hilt, but in a strange light, a powerful energy was transmitted to the gem in the center of the hilt, and then a straight blade made entirely of energy appeared. The power of this strange energy blade was still increasing, and in the end even the surrounding light was bent, like a strange stream of light trembling slightly. Elemental Fission Wave Blade can last for 10 seconds. Blade Master. Whether this plan succeeds or not depends on you. A tired metallic voice sounded. The Blade Master's eyes burst out a threatening light, and then he turned into a stream of light and rushed into the portal in front of him. Blade Master. Among all the melee professions, he had the most powerful explosive power. No melee professions could have more explosive power than a Blade Master, and only they could easily break the energy shield of a spellcaster. No melee professions could compare with a Blade Master in terms of damage output. The legendary Blade Master was one of the few existences who had the ability to directly kill the incarnations of gods, although they were still so fragile after entering the realm of legends. Note: legendary Blade Masters still can't wear protective gear. A light flashed through the air. Aura slash. Weakness detection. The seemingly simple attack contained the most fatal blow. The figure of the Blade Master crossed the air in an instant, and the next moment, the strange energy blade had penetrated the body of the Queen of Spiders, directly through her heart, leaving a huge hole in her body. However, there was no blood in the wound because the scorching energy had evaporated everything. Success. There was a dead silence on the battlefield, and the Blade Master's attack was launched at the moment when the divine power field was broken. Did we succeed? A slightly hesitant voice sounded. All the people present were legendary professions, and they could feel whether the target was still alive or not. The target seemed to have been killed by them. But they couldn't believe that they had killed the legendary Queen of Spiders so easily. Even if they had planned for hundreds of years, in order to fully simulate the best sniping tactics of the Arcane Empire era, they even took the risk to enter the Clockwork Nirvana's mechanical mirror. But now that they seemed to have killed the target, everyone present still couldn't believe it. At this moment, a cold and urgent voice suddenly sounded: unknown energy reaction. Unknown energy reaction. The target has an unknown high-energy reaction. The half-plane energy is rapidly consumed. The current remaining energy is 30%, 20%, 10%. The half-plane shackles have failed. An unknown plane eroding energy has appeared. An unknown mutation has occurred in the half-plane. An unknown dark energy is eroding the half-plane. The half-plane is in a state of collapse. Alert! Alert! The battle plan has failed. All units prepare to retreat. Time froze at this moment. The Queen of Spiders, who had already lost her life, suddenly opened her eyes. A terrible divine radiance appeared in her eyes. In just a moment, her broken body was quickly repaired. At the same time, 8 terrifying spider legs appeared behind her. An unknown energy reflection slowly emerged, and a space crack seemed to open behind the Queen of Spiders. In it, a black evil land could be seen. There were countless creatures on this land, but they were all terrible existences for mortals. Ah! A cold and cruel female voice sounded. The Queen of Spiders slowly opened her eyes, and a cruel smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. With a gentle wave of her hand, the surrounding space was distorted. The figure of the Orc Sword Saint was frozen in place, and the next moment he turned into thousands of neat pieces of meat scattered. She looked down at everyone on the battlefield and sneered, "So it's the remnants of the Arcane Empire. You don't even have a floating city? Are you planning to kill me with these pieces of scrap metal? You're too naive." Crack. The Queen of Spiders gently clenched her fists, and the 2 legendary magic power armors instantly turned into a large pile of scrap iron. An incomprehensible domain shrouded the nearby space. All the portals were closed in an instant, and the unknown domain energy eroded this material world as if it was isolated in another space. Ridiculous spatial skills. A mocking smile appeared on the Queen of Spiders' face, and she slowly said, "The only surprise is the Clockwork Nirvana. I thought all the time perceivers had fallen. I didn't expect there to be a fish that escaped the net. What a tenacious vitality. The gods don't want to see your existence, but you can appear again and again." The Queen of Spiders raised her hand gently, and the stiff body of the monk was immediately divided into 2 parts. The head fell to the ground, and then the headless body slowly fell to the ground. Lolth's face was full of mockery. Mortals are mortals after all. They can never understand the power of the gods. Time, space, matter, bitwall. As long as it is within the domain of the gods, the rules are completely set by us. Distorted space. The barbarian suddenly let out an incomparably mournful scream, and in the next moment, his burly body melted like a candle, gradually melting into a pool of horrifying flesh and blood. The Queen of Spiders waved her hand casually, as if she was wiping away inconspicuous dust. She cast her gaze to a location dozens of kilometers away. The next moment, the veiled psionic warlock trembled all over. Then her face turned pale and her breath became extremely weak. Her vitality gradually faded along with the power of a curse. The veiled woman's breath gradually faded, and her skin seemed to have lost its vitality. Her face was pale and her expression was blank and fearful. She desperately fled backward, but the once powerful woman was now as weak as an ordinary person. Annoying little fly. The Queen of Spiders let out a cold hum, and then her gaze seemed to penetrate the space and locked onto a certain position. Her figure gradually merged into the distorted space and she said playfully, "Found you. Lowly little mice. Wait for my arrival." The figure of the Queen of Spiders disappeared. But it was not over, and even the entire bottomless abyss shook because of it. The bottomless abyss. The abyss of demons. The divine realm of the Queen of Spiders, Lolth. Since the battle of the Queen of Spiders was promoted to the greater divine power realm, the Queen of Spiders Lolth had lowered her divine realm to a deeper realm. That was the bottomless abyss. The Queen of Spiders moved her divine realm to the bottomless abyss, and she became the most powerful evil god in the bottomless abyss, an outsider, a slaughterer, and a schemer. Her arrival made the entire bottomless abyss tremble. Countless abyssal demons felt afraid and uneasy, but there was nothing they could do. Because absolute power was enough to change the rules, no one wanted to see the arrival of the Queen of Spiders, but no one could expel her. Because she was the Queen of Spiders Lolth, the bottomless abyss. With a huge amount of divine power, the divine realm of the abyss of demons, which had descended into the bottomless abyss, began to move little by little. The huge vibration caused by the movement of the plane directly transmitted the energy to every corner of the bottomless abyss, and countless abyssal demons looked at the location of this space. At the same time, inside an incomparably splendid palace, the lazy figure of the succubus queen was lying on a luxurious throne. Her eyes suddenly turned to a certain space, and her expression seemed to change slightly. She murmured, "What is the bitch of the Queen of Spiders going to do?" She actually moved her divine realm at this time. Could it be that she was in some kind of trouble? Hee. Maybe I should leave her a surprise at this time. P.S. 2 in 1 chapter. I finished this paragraph in one breath. Continue to work hard tomorrow. Chapter 437. An indescribable force burst out from behind him. Soren's face changed in an instant. He picked up the Lolita dragon beside him and immediately activated haste. His whole body flew away like a shadow. As one of the few top rogues in the Underdark who had seen the body of the Queen of Spiders, Soren had received many missions when he was among the drows. Perhaps because the reputation accumulated from the missions was too high, Soren's name gradually reached the ears of the Queen of Spiders at that time, and she forced him to accept a difficult mission. Is that the Queen of Spiders? The expression on the Lolita dragon's face was also a little panicked. As a dragon, she easily slept all the way to the legendary realm, but what just happened in front of her completely shattered her past confidence. Perhaps mortals were as weak as ants in her eyes, but in fact they were also like ants in the eyes of some existences. Soren nodded slowly. Then a familiar force emerged, and suddenly he recalled the memory of several times when he met the Queen of Spiders. Life and death. Shard of divinity. Death's hand. Godhood of assassination. As a top rogue who had faced the incarnations of the gods several times, Soren knew the terrible power of the old gods too well. Compared with a terrible existence like the Queen of Spiders, legends were just as insignificant as a speck of dust. There were many records about the fall of the Arcane Empire, but in fact, there had always been a conspiracy theory that the fall of the Arcane Empire was because they threatened the rule of the gods. The power of the great arcanists was too strong, and the field of their research also involved the realm of the gods, so they fell overnight for some reason. During the period of the Arcane Empire, its influence spread throughout the multiverse, and there were millions of legendary professions inside. Conspiracy theorists believed that no one except the gods could eliminate so many legendary professions in one breath. Gods. The field that Soren was exploring little by little was also a field beyond the imagination of mortals. In theory, gods were invincible, or at least they could not be defeated by mortals because this was the rule set by the gods. Throughout history, the fall of the gods had always been due to internal strife. Examples of mortals killing gods could be counted on one hand. If it wasn't for the arrival of the Avatar crisis, a god with weak divine power could also kill a group of legendary professionals. Gods are almost invincible in their divine kingdoms. Within the domain of the gods, a single ability of form change, reality change, or size change, is enough to easily change your body into any form that they wish to see. For non-divine creatures, some gods who have mastered the divine domain of death, slaughter, and destruction can directly erase the life of the other party. Deities are immune to the majority of negative status effects, and they always take the maximum value of the immunity test. Only gods in the form of saints can be killed by mortals. The Rules of God Slaying, Volume 1, Chapter 3 by D.K. Ur. Far away from the battlefield. Just as the Queen of Spiders' figure disappeared, a blurry and distorted shadow quietly retreated. I failed. The power of the Queen of Spiders is too strong. We mistakenly estimated the power of the Queen of Spiders based on the strength of the god of half-elves and rogues. Even if we have increased the amount of power difference by nearly 100 times, the gap between the two sides is still too big. The battle plan failed, and only one member of the God Slayer tactical team survived. The coordinates of the half-bit wall seem to have been locked by the Queen of Spiders. Request support from the astral floating tower to retreat. I must return to the sigil and bring the news back to the Church of Non-Gods. The shadow quickly disappeared into the darkness. On the other side, Soren finally slowed down a little after putting enough distance between them. He looked at the Lolita dragon in front of him and said with a serious expression, "Things are a little beyond our expectations. If even the Queen of Spiders has appeared, then I'm afraid we can't stay in the Underdark for a while." The Avatar Crisis. The act of killing a god before the Avatar Crisis began would definitely arouse the anger of the Queen of Spiders. Soon, a terrible purge would spread to all parts of the Underdark. At least before the Avatar Crisis officially broke out, the Queen of Spiders would need to vent her anger. For now, although the gods had sensed something, none of them knew what was about to happen. Soren was probably the one who knew the content of the Avatar Crisis best. To some extent, this should be the only obvious advantage he had over many gods. No one knew when the Avatar Crisis would break out, how strong the outbreak would be, and how large the scope of the impact would be. Even the gods who were resisting the chaotic energy could only vaguely guess the general direction. So during this period of time, there were actually a lot of tentative actions. Not only the gods were testing other gods, but other powerful organizations were also testing various targets. Everything that happened today. Soren had no impression of it in the past, which meant that it happened before other adventurers entered the Underdark. Although he didn't know the origin of the team of professionals who attacked the Queen of Spiders, Soren could roughly guess that they had a great relationship with the Arcane Empire, because the whole battle plan seemed quite sci-fi, and the premise of all this was that they needed the thaling of the Arcane Empire to complete a huge tactical calculation. Soren had encountered this kind of fighting method before, but it was not as scary as today. If the target was not the Queen of Spiders, they would have succeeded today. Any god below the mid-level divine power could be defeated by this level of tactic. Unfortunately, they chose the wrong target. They chose the Queen of Spiders, who was already a great divine power and in charge of too many clergies and domain powers. He didn't know why they wanted to kill the Queen of Spiders. However, Soren was not surprised. After all, the Queen of Spiders was famous for attracting firepower, and her enemies were already countless. As early as the mid-level divine power, which was before the Battle of the Queen of Spiders broke out, the Queen of Spiders, Lolth, was already fighting the entire elven divine system alone. It was not surprising. If the Queen of Spiders wasn't so powerful, Soren wouldn't have turned around and run away when he saw her. As for why someone would think of killing her, Soren didn't quite understand the reason. In his memory, there were only a few existences who would take such a risk and be so hostile to the Queen of Spiders. For example, the churches of gods and non-gods, an exploration organization in the astral plane, or some powerful force that he didn't know. Note, before the establishment of the Drows, the Queen of Spiders was more alone against the elven divine system. However, as a goddess who was good at using conspiracy, she would also find some powerful allies. Queen of Spiders. The Lolita dragon lowered her head and muttered to herself. Since the beginning of the incident, she seemed to be a little depressed, and her whole person seemed to be absent-minded, as if there was something on her mind. But at this time, Soren didn't have time to think so much. The battle at the beginning was too terrifying. He might not even be able to hold on for a second under such a tactical attack. As for the Queen of Spiders' strong counterattack after taking all the attacks, Soren wasn't surprised at all. At present, the Avatar Crisis hadn't completely broken out, and the Queen of Spiders hadn't been completely deprived of her divinity. Unless several other gods with great divine power joined forces, it was basically impossible to kill her. Many tactics seemed strong, but they were useless against some existences. For example, someone once wanted to kill the Queen of Succubus, who didn't seem to be very strong, but when they really wanted to do it, they found that they couldn't even pass through the aura of seductive beauty. In the end, the Queen of Succubus casually opened the domain of fallen desire, and the group of people began to play the shameful game that they would regard as a lifetime of shame. There was more light in front of them. There was a strange fluorescent plant growing nearby, but as soon as they got close, Soren's expression changed, and he put his hand on the hilt of icing death. In front of them appeared a figure on the ground. From the outline it should be a woman. Her exposed skin was very pale, and her face was covered with a veil, so they couldn't see her face clearly. However, Soren saw a familiar symbol on her body. His heart couldn't help but thump, and he thought to himself, the Godslayer organization? A psionic warlock? When Soren turned the woman over, he and the little Lolita next to him couldn't help but look at each other in surprise. The little Lolita frowned slightly, and after a glance she said, "She's dying." Soren nodded slowly. "Yes, she's dying." A powerful psionic warlock with a profession level of more than level 30 was so easily killed by the Queen of Spiders. Soren spread out her wrist and saw a dark green symbol that looked like a black widow on it. He couldn't help but murmur, "Assassination priesthood. Craftiness domain. It's the curse of the Queen of Spiders." She's basically hopeless. Since the Battle of the Queen of Spiders, the Queen of Spiders, Lolita, had been coveting other powerful priesthoods or corresponding priesthoods. Craftiness domain. Basically, not many people who were cursed by the Queen of Spiders could survive. So, the little Lolita slightly looked at the psionic warlock, whose breath was fading, and said slowly, "Unless a god gives her a new life, she's basically dead now." Time froze. When he heard this sentence from her mouth, Soren's eyes couldn't help but burst into light. He seemed to have thought of something. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.